Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, staff, any members of the public, councillors, online viewers and participants. So this is where we're getting down to the numbers and the projects. That's so exciting. I thought yesterday we like sort of killed our brains on today's. And I'm very conscious we've got a list with lots and lots of spend on it and lots and lots of projects. And our immediate desire as councillors is to give a look at each one by one and have a good discussion about each one. So obviously we can't do that in the time we've got. So really interested as you lead into this to flag up how we, because there will be stuff that people have got views on. So how do we make the time to give that feedback, I guess?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's...
Yeah, so maybe if I'll just do a little bit of an intro, but I really am not going to be doing too much talking. I'll leave that to no, I don't. So yeah, absolutely, we are kind of at the exciting part. If we could describe it as that. I was just going to maybe do two things. One is just kind of refresh everyone's awareness of what's coming up over the next month, because it's sort of important to see how we piece all of this together. This is not a very good analogy, but I think of this a little bit like baking a layered cake. Until we have all of the layers there and we can see how high the cake is or how wide the cake is, we're not quite sure what that whole cake looks like. Having said that, we're kind of going through each layer of this cake piece by piece, and if we can think about the fact that it does and will all come together. But today we're here to talk about capital investment, the potential capital program for waste, transport, and a chunk of the property portfolio. And then, so think of that as a piece of that's a layer. And then on the 3rd of September, we will be talking about the potential capital program for social and natural infrastructure, or community services, as we like to call it. So that's another layer. And we will also be taking you through the first lens of the operating expenditure. So we'll be kind of looping our way back to activity plan land and starting to explain, okay, as we look forward, what do these activity plans start to look like in terms of cost and potential trade-offs and things like that. And so off the back of today and the 3rd of September, we'll have hopefully some good direction and guidance from yourselves as to where you see some of those important trade-offs being made and where the direction is going. And then we will go away and start cooking a bit more, and we'll bring all of that back predominantly on the 27th of September. So that's when you'll really see, okay, how is this all starting to come together? And what does that mean in terms of potential rating impact? What does that mean in terms of debt headroom and financial strategy and things like that? And then we iterate through that again early October, again late October. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity to refine and shape and move that forward. So what we will do today is I will hand over firstly to Tanya, who's just going to give us a little bit of financial context, I guess, just as a bit of a framing for the way we lead in today. And then I'll hand over to Jessie and the P&I team, who have been really, really busily working on all of this. And hopefully, and I know this is really a lot to digest, but what we want to take you through really is to getting your input on what are the real non-negotiables for council. So, how do we build that kind of baseline? And what's important to you in terms of prioritising. And the way we've built all of this model is we can then take that input from you and factor that in, and you've seen that in some of the material, and we can then show you what that means for different lenses of the capital programs across these different activity areas. So, you know, if you want to protect levels of service, what would need to be included? If you're willing to trade off some levels of service, what would come out? That sort of approach. And I think, to your point, Mayor, where there are projects or initiatives that you say, hey, we really want to dive more into these, we'll capture that, tag that, we'll turn those into the A3s, something more to interrogate, and we'll bring that back to you. So we'll build up that portfolio of, hey, we want to really talk more about this one and this one and this and this one. So maybe today we can look more to capturing those requests rather than diverting too much into any specific line item. But I think that sort of makes some sense.
I guess the only thing Quinn has sort of mentioned it before is, I guess we know the baseline, like, you know, we know the cost to households of all these services, the water services, plus what we do, and we know we were up against limit, and all we could do really was what we needed to do for the last LGP. So I'm just wondering how we consider all of this, understanding the financial limits, you know, because we can give you an awful lot of feedback, but actually what can we do given affordability and the
maybe that's the perfect segue, Tanya, because effectively we want to give you a bit of rule of thumb that we can start to utilise in thinking about those considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Quentin's got a question for
Quentin.
Yeah, well, I mean, just speaking to that point, I mean, that I did note that in yesterday's graphs there were some indications that, you know, our debt limits might be sitting at about significantly lower anyway than what they without the water. So yeah, I mean that remains. What we don't have is any indication of where we sit with the rating capacity, and obviously, I mean, the discussion we had last week around reform, and you know, the indication that the combined cost of reform could be in the order of $50 million over 3 years, which is actually going to be outside of our rates caps anyway. So we've got some interesting questions to ask.
Thanks.
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. With everything that Ian has said and your natural queries about how we're going to progress this, my suggestion is, and I'm sure it's the advice you've had in the past, is that we need to start by looking at what the professional team of engineers and community specialists suggest that we need to focus on. And they've done an incredible job of putting forward what they believe is crucial capital expenditure versus growth funded versus optional. If there is such a thing, I don't know that there is. So it's a very, very difficult job to prioritise that. Can I suggest that there's never a council or never a budget where there's enough money, and so it's always about taking the long list and shortening it. And it's for you 12 to agree the order of priority within that list, and where we can afford to draw that line will become clear as we go along. Now, this funding, you know, partially funded subsidies, growth funding, debt funding, these are the things we'll bring to you that will make a difference. But in reality, we are still going to need to say, what do we do in what order, rather than say how much money we got. So we might draw the line at 100 million or 150 or 60 million. That will become clear as we understand all the other parts to this puzzle. But at the end of the day, we still need a list of priorities. So let me read out something that I've prepared if you can just bear with me.
Just in case you're going to have any questions about those priorities, that's what the second. So that's what Jesse's going to how you do that.
Yeah. The current LGP has proposed capital expenditure of $753 million ex-water across the next 7 years. That's an average annual spend of 108 million. That is in excess of by 30% of what we've delivered on average in recent years, which is 78 million. The various scenarios provided in the information that you've got in front of you for the next 7 years equivalent are of similar magnitude, 743 million to 1.6 billion. So that if you consider those various scenarios, an annual average spend of 106 million to 220 million. So there's a wide range of potentials there, but what I'm suggesting to you is the minimum that's been proposed in the scenarios is similar to the minimum to what we have in the current LGP. Now that's not telling you that the current LGP has no rate increases. It's just saying that that was what was agreed in the last LGP. And I'm only offering you that is to give you some kind of context for what we're working with. We are working through the various Capex budgets, which you've got in front of you, to determine how we can best fund the Capex and what the appropriate tools are. Our first action is to understand the potential options for growth funding, and to do that we'll be asking Natalie to help with potential tools outside of what we're currently using. After that, renewals and level of service debt repayment would traditionally be funded by rates through the proxy called depreciation, and our normal growth debt would be funded by DCs or repaid by DCs. There is a natural tension, a natural trade-off between rates and debt, between affordability of ratepayers measured by rates per household, and by the affordability of council measured by debt revenue. Our teams will be analysing these options, understanding the risks, and coming back to you at the end of September with our report on options and scenarios for funding. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of critical capital expenditure to consider. It's incredibly important that we take the time to work through the process. So that's my outline is at the beginning. And we've got a couple of things else, but
Can I just raise one thing? If you could go back to that previous slide. And I don't want to take it down the rabbit hole of growth that we had yesterday, because obviously we're working on that. But if we're increasing our population of 5% a year compounding, that's over 10 years, that's 63%. So to have 27% of Capex as growth feels very light from a completely uninformed position. And it goes back to the discussion we had yesterday, how we're allocating. So that's
the key point there is that was the 24 LGP.
yeah.
And water is removed. So remember,
Yeah.
water would have been a big portion of this
Yeah.
as growth.
Yeah.
And
But sort of
can I,
intuitively, as you are increasing, you would expect the growth costs to align with increased services, capital expenditure, whether that's parks, reserves, facilities, sports centres.
so that's a very big part of the work that we're doing at the moment with Natalie, Nathan, Walsh, and Jessie and the rest of the team is analysing our process for determining the cost drivers and therefore what we can put into the future for growth. And as you say, there's some intuitive understanding of what that would be. And Catherine is exactly right that the biggest part of growth in the past would have been water, especially the last 3 years. So that table will look different to what you have in front of you that you have from Jessie. And those are early days too on the growth work. They're doing a lot of work. Jessie's team are doing great work on understanding this process. So my piece here is very short. I just want to, if you're okay, we'll go back to the next slide.
I might just add one thing is as we start to go through the material, and Jessie will explain this. I know we've covered this in the past that we've done a level of analysis of growth versus level of service versus renewals for every single project, which has been that's a completely new experience for us at this stage of the LTP. We're going to have to qualify that to say that's, that hasn't been through all of the refinement of the lessons that we're learning from Natalie's work, etc. But it's a really good starting point, and it's a really good lens into, as we think about those priorities, and the affordability into the Capex program, being able to start to look at projects that are maybe more heavily level of service or more heavily growth oriented, having that lens to go, well, where's the burden landing? You can actually start to help inform some of that better prioritisation.
And what you'll then be able to see because of that work this time is that often when there is a project that has a growth component and it might have been identified because of growth, there is often also a significant level of service component or a renewals component, because if you're doing this, you may as well, you know, there's other things you have to address as well. So Jessie can, but she's got an example in the slides to where that might become more obvious as well.
Thank you. So just a very high level understanding of capital expenditure. I think Ian quoted me some weeks ago to say that capital expenditure eventually becomes operating expenditure. And it does. Every piece of equipment needs to be run. Every building needs staff, electricity, insurance. It needs repairs, it needs repayment of the debt, and it needs eventually renewals. So while we often talk about capital expenditure as being something that we can fund by debt and therefore less painful, it actually adds to our rates quite substantially over time. And I've said to the team, it's like this great big engine behind you, pushing you. As the total amount of investment in assets grows, your total commitment to the future grows. Now, I drive a Camry for the reason that I'm cheap. I could drive something else. I could drive a much nicer vehicle, but I don't want to repair it, replace it, insure it. And so when we're talking about our Capex decisions, we need to think those things. And so I've tried to, we call this the 543. Didn't end up with those numbers on there.
Yeah, it's just at the underneath.
At the bottom, okay. So some of the analysis work we've done is showing that the cash operating costs of this council are running at about 5% of the value of its assets. Right, so that's an efficiency number, and I've done a lot of benchmarking to look at other councils. Naturally, bigger councils, really bigger councils, around the 3.5. Other councils are 5 to 6. So we're sitting well in that area. We're saying our cash operating costs, on average, for whatever reason, is 5% of our assets. So when you think ahead, if you're adding $1 billion of assets, you've got to think that long term that will grow. Now, as Jeremy said to me, it's 0 to 1 or 2 in the first year, because obviously depending on the asset. But we're saying 0 to 5, we need to consider that's going to add to our costs. 4% is the round number, is the cost of interest, 3.64%, whatever it is at the minute. We can get that. And we're funding for debt, so therefore we've got to include that. And 3% is the long-term repayment of the debt. Now, not the growth debt. We're assuming that the DCs will eventually pay them. But that, not discretionary debt, where we need to upgrade something. We call it level of service, but it's often compliance or required. So if you add the 5, the 4, and the 3, you've got 12. So over time, we're saying at 100 million, you've got $12 million of increased operating costs. Is that reasonable? Yeah. So, you know, there's all the timing, and it's a wee bit different when you get into the details. But when you're thinking that through and thinking about what we're adding in Capex, we have to think what we're adding. Now, the team of all 2 teams have done a really good job as well. Said to them, please bring the consequential direct OPEX to us. So as you get through the projects, you'll see that it says, well, this one might be 5%, might be less, might be more. Naturally, as I said, running a building costs a lot more than building a road necessarily before it has to be repaired. So when we talk about prioritising these options, some of these options have consequential OPEX and others don't. So that's why the 5% is average. So there's a lot in this, but I know that you're all able to work through it. And that was simply all I wanted to add to the framing up of this. And before I hand to Jessie, was there any questions?
Silly one, a little bit like endowment math. So 12% a year, but then we have a 4.5% growth rate minus that. And then we also have, I'm just going to round it off, 3% inflation. Take that off. So you have 12%, then take off 7.5, you're left with 4.5. Is that reasonable?
I wouldn't take off the inflation, but I'd take off the growth.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the growth, we all use growth to help. I'm just trying to think of the right word.
Justify.
I was going to say average, but justify might be the word. growth in ratepayers in growth areas is a little bit like GDP growth, right? It all helps reduce the average cost per person until it stops.
I didn't figure in GDP, but you can also minus out GDP too, right?
We'll bring you in the future some stats about average rates per ratepayer or per household, and over time. And that's why I'm saying we are looking at the affordability versus affordability of the council. So obviously, if you add costs and you divide it by another 1,000 people, it is less.
Is there a way of, when we're depreciating an asset and like so we build something new and it's big and it's catering for people into the future that are here to help pay the operational costs, is there a way to structure the depreciation so that it falls more in line with growth? Do you see what I mean?
I understand it completely, councillor. So another day for another discussion, I'd like the opportunity to talk to you about depreciation versus actual renewals, because one's a proxy and it's a bad proxy. Oh, bad's not the right word. It's a poor proxy for a council like yourselves when you have half your assets are less than 5 years old. So if we look at the fact that it's from 2020 to now, you've doubled the asset through Capex, inflation and invested assets, then naturally those assets aren't that old. And if we genuinely look at the renewals, it's well out of line with depreciation. So it's a discussion that I have started and we would like to have.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Matt, were you? No, just anything you were thinking. Okay.
It's the same sort of thing with repaying some ways.
So we meet again. Before we kick off, I'd like to introduce you all to Hannah Rickers. Hannah is our Senior Investment Advisor in Property and Infrastructure, and she is a big part of what's been driving us to this point. Her energy and capability have really started to show through. So I'm doing the talking, but Hannah's doing the walking. And I might just also point out we have a really strong contingent of P&I crew in the room. I think everyone's familiar to you all. I guess the idea of today is perhaps we'll work through this afternoon quite organically, so you know exactly who's there to call on for anything that might come up. I guess to kick us off, right, great. I suppose just acknowledging this is a level of detail and involvement we've had with you as a council that certainly need a bit. We haven't gone to this level of lifting the curtain on previous LTPs. And so I acknowledge it's not perfect, but the idea here is to give you more visibility of the kind of things that typically would go on behind the scenes to enable you to actually influence that. The other comment I would make is we're not looking for decisions from you today. We're just looking for direction so we can go away and build some more tailored information to bring back to you to inform decisions. So please don't feel like if I'm pushing you to say, do you want your obligation level at a 4 or 5, that's locked and loaded. It's just so you can see what the consequences of that decision might be. I guess the other thing to acknowledge is that this model, which we'll show you today, it's really, really cool. I'm excited to show you, is it's great, but it's far from perfect. It doesn't do everything. We built it with the tools we have in-house. So we've tried to acknowledge up front that actually there's a bunch of things that will be important to you that sit outside of that framework. As a starting point, we think consequential OPEX is one of them, the likelihood of securing co-funding, how ready something is for delivery, how, I guess, well developed the thinking is around what it might be, and anything else you want to add to that list. So the framework tells us, you know, based on capital cost and potential investment impact, this might be a really good investment to make, but there's all these other things to consider as well. I guess on the flip side, you might have picked up the Ballarat Street car park upgrade in your detailed materials. I'm sure you'll look line by line. The framework tells us not a good investment to make, it's expensive, impact you get, but by the time you fold the consequential revenue we get from that in, it wafts its space really quickly, and then actually as a council you're making money. So just acknowledging that there's all sorts of factors, and we're kind of just focusing on a part of it today. Did you have any questions up top about the materials you've received, or any thoughts about how you might want to work through the afternoon?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
There is a lot, I guess.
Thank you.
Quentin?
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I had was just about granularity because, well, look, I get we can't go too deep and we've got to deal with it right level. I'm just concerned that there were some things that get lost in translation, and I'm just looking at Skipper's investment, for instance, and it said $15 million, but the difference between the bridge and the road maintenance are very distinctly different things and different funding opportunities. So I just sort of trying to get my head around those sort of granularity. Yeah.
I'm really sorry I didn't catch the example you were using.
Skipper's Bridge.
I said Skipper's Bridge because it's got $15 million assigned to it, but or Skipper's Road and Bridge, sorry. But the Skipper's Road and Bridge are two distinctly very different issues, and I don't know how you separate them in terms of risk and funding and case when they're together. And as I said, I acknowledge that we can't separate everything, but I just struggle with something like that.
We have Alison online.
I think the description's got a placeholder for repair and placement of the existing bridge. It's not right.
It does include the road.
It's a running road.
Ellie, are you online?
I'm online, yeah.
Would you like to comment on why we've put them together?
Yeah, look, there is, I guess there's a real, so Tony Pickard, firstly to start off with, I guess Tony Pickard has got a piece of work where he's going to be looking at what options we have, and it's really important, I guess, to not look at the bridge in isolation, because the road itself is a heritage structure itself, and the road is very expensive, and I guess without the bridge, the road may or may not be something that needs the same level of investment if you have it or don't. So really the conversation has got to be considered, you've got to consider them together.
The other thing I would, I guess, call out is when we're building an LTP, we have to make an assumption around what the solution might be, particularly for things like Skippers. We haven't done the business case yet. We don't know what's going to be the most economically viable, politically palatable. So by confirming a budget through the LTP, you're not committing to that specific solution. You're saying, actually, this responding to this need is a priority for us, and for something like Skippers, there will still be a business case to come into choices. Do you just do the bridge? Do you just do the road? Do you do them together? Do you walk away? So it's a decision at a point in time. It's not casting the die irrevocably.
Yeah, and look, as I said, I'm not wanting to get caught up in that specific example, but I just, you know, as I said, it's the granularity is the point there. But anyway, we'll just run through and see where we get to. Thank you.
Just the general question. Obviously, we're putting in placeholder figures for up to 10 years, and you know, in the past, some of those figures may have been constrained by debt headroom. But the other thing is that often we've completely underestimated the cost because they're a placeholder figure. And talk about the Glenorchy water tanks as being a classic example where there's 500,000 in the budget, we spent 5 million, and because we spent 5 million because we hadn't costed it until the year before, we'd only collected DCs on the 60 lot subdivision based on $500,000. So if we don't get the figures realistic, we're under collecting. But it's how do we try and get some better figures without putting all the work to cost things that may never get there? And that's the dilemma, isn't it? You know, we need to have some figures to collect the DCs, but we've no idea actually what it will cost in 8 years' time.
One of the things we're looking at specifically through this funding and financing work stream that Natalie's leading is actually how can we be more agile to the changing information that develops as a project takes better shape. So we perhaps could be more responsive to updating our cost drivers more regularly. The other thing you might have noticed in your materials is we've included in what level or type of certainty is attached to that budget estimate. That's really useful information for us as we program out the LTP because we can see actually there's really high risk attached to this one in terms of it could be a whole lot more, it could be a whole lot less. We should program it for later so we've got more time to develop that and get the certainty. And then we can use whatever cycles exist for us to, I guess, update and fine tune those cost drivers over time.
What we are also trying to do, not trying to do, what he and I have done is had QS estimates looked at for these projects. So they're still not perfect because they're based on the scope of what we might be doing. But we're trying to put in place more regular formal kind of reviews of the costs to try and manage that.
And do we refresh the forward costs on an annual basis or just every 3 years?
It's a bit of a hybrid. We would refresh actually more than annually for things that are moving into delivery. So for projects that are live, they're active, we're updating our estimates at the end of each design phase. If we're getting an indication that the cost could be shifting materially, we'll get another independent review. Whereas projects that are sitting further out in the LTP, they probably would only be updated every 3 years. And often we find that actually they're no more developed than they were 3 years ago, and the QS is just testing are the unit rates still consistent with what we would expect today, has the right amount of inflation. So it's a real mixture.
The only thing I'd say is Natalie yesterday talked about how because we've been adding inflation onto our policy, onto our development contributions policy, we have been kind of clawing back some of that, and we may in the future review our DC policy every year to pick up changes in projects. So that may be an option that we could do that more often. Yeah.
But, and certainly, so what that would be advantaged is as things are moving through the design cycle, as Jesse's talking about, you're not waiting until the next 3-year review of the DC to feed them in. You have an opportunity as things move through the design cycle to feed them in every year, rather than waiting 3 years.
The other thing we did experience a little with LTP 24 was perhaps in some instances a little bit of an overcorrection. You know, we were coming out of COVID, we're in economic recession, and actually the budgets that went into LTP 24 were highly inflationary. And so, you know, we are seeing some projects in delivery now that actually we did undercook the budget, but there's a handful that actually we budgeted more than we needed to, and these projects are returning surpluses. So I think the pendulum is starting to settle. Any other questions, or shall we get into it?
Yeah.
All right, what I might do is hand over to Hannah just to explain this investment framework that you've built, and please feel free to jump in with me.
So the investment prioritization framework fundamentally seeks to ask 2 questions of everything that's put up for consideration. How important is this, and what will it cost? As you've heard, there's a lot of complexity within both of those questions, and the framework allows us to sort of change the levers of both live and show you before any decisions are made what the sort of implications of some of the changes might be. Also has been covered is there's a lot of considerations outside the model. So you might see it could do next to a project, and you might think of so many reasons that we should include it. And I think in some of the options that you've seen, you'll see a lot of could do's or even some defers included. And we can maybe explain some of the thought process behind that so it all comes together.
How much is legislation like roading upgrades, for example, you have to do those? Do we see where that's flowed through into the table?
Yeah, you'll definitely see that. It's a good segue to the next. I can probably explain some of it. In terms of how important is it, we mainly looked in 5 different areas. So obligations looks at how much legislative, regulatory, or contractual commitment do we have. For all of these categories, the higher the score, the more like important in that category. Service performance was viewed through the lens of how important is this investment to maintain existing levels of service. So not investing would cause a deterioration versus it would have no impact. Growth in requirement looked at the extent to which the investment is required to support growth forecast and demand. A financial impact looked at the direct known financial consequences to QLDC of not investing. So for example, if we don't maintain an asset, we know for sure that its asset life will be shortened and we'll have to pay more to renew it than have we just invested in maintaining it. So that's a known direct financial consequence. The other risk category is a risk assessment that was aligned to the QLDC risk policy. But when you think about the sort of 4 categories above, you can see that we are considering some of the key project level or investment level risks already. What are our risks contractually to service performance, our ability to make growth, financial risks? So you really see risk as embedded in the way we're thinking about it, and the other risk category as more of a looking wider at some of that strategic lens and making sure that we're thinking as well about other risk categories.
So for those of you who were here for the last LGP, you'll see some of these concepts will be familiar because they were, they're based in how we did it last time. So what Hannah and Jessie have done is kind of built on that into a more robust kind of structured model. You know, last time was the first time we used some of these concepts, so we did it more qualitatively. What you're going to see is a much more mature model based in some of the same concepts, but building them out a lot more.
In terms of the obligation level, just looking at what's just been handed out, when you've got policies and presumably our strategies and policies, how did they sit in a hierarchy? Like, was there a hierarchy from legislative to in the meeting our strategies and policies will be considered lower?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you just got handed the sort of scoring.
Yeah.
A 5 is anything that we are legislatively, contractually obligated to do.
Yeah.
A 4 was contractually obligated or consent requirements that have some level to unwind. A 3 was
anything that you've adopted in the last 3 years. So the waste minimisation and management plan, those kind of things. A 2 was actually
older policy.
you've considered it in the past, but it's probably outdated now.
Okay.
A 1 was something that we've probably socialised quite widely. It's a vibe. And a 0 is, as far as we are aware, there is nothing imposing any form of
That recent policy sits at 3. I was just wondering if they could get lost in the framework, like our strategic direction might get.
Yeah.
lost.
Definitely.
The other thing I'd like to say is, while this is how we've assessed the initiatives, there's still opportunity to influence this. So if it feels like something's missing, or what we've suggested in terms of the order of hierarchy in each category is in alliance with what you would have expected to see, we can hear that question and we can go away and talk.
Quick question, could we give an example? So contractual obligations are very high.
Yeah.
In illness must do. Do we ever get situations, I mean, presumably we're entering into contracts because of the things that we know we need to do or we've agreed to do. Do we get situations where we've got contractual obligations that actually we don't think we need to do those anymore? How do we manage that?
I think it would be very unusual for you to have an obligation established contractually that we don't need to do. I think the slight nuance between whether it's a 4 or 5 is actually, do we have the crew on site building this thing now? Extremely difficult to pull the pin on versus maybe we've got an ECI contractor or something on board and actually you've still got an off ramp. Might be tricky, might be a fight, but you could walk away from it.
And sorry for my question because it was answered in the sheet that I just hadn't quite read. Sorry.
There was a lot to read.
Yeah, that's something. We have a little bit more information on the risk category because we appreciate it can be complex. So basically how this one works is we considered that if we did not proceed with the investment, we just didn't do that project, what are the risk events that could occur? And then these risk sort of categories, the likelihood and the consequence align with definitions in the QLDC risk policy. We also wanted to call out that these scores don't align necessarily directly with the tier 1 strategic risks that we appreciate council review. So these scores won't tell you if we invest in this initiative, you know, where can we kind of pull more sort of into risk appetite or target. There is some interesting call outs to be made, but they're a bit more relevant to individual initiatives. So you'll see that in the next iteration of categories. So a slide on the capital expenditure costs. So as we were already discussing a little bit, the framework mostly looks at the capital costs because they are the most concrete. Estimates were put together for all initiatives and many validated by a quantity surveyor. So these estimate types that you see here range from basically how confident we would be in the estimate, lowest to down to highest. So we have a relatively high level of confidence in planning and renewals budgets. We manage our assets. We can see our historic spend. We know if the rates are going to change, and we manage, unders and overs day to day. Similarly, if something's in delivery or it's been through detailed design recently, we would have a higher level of confidence. When you get down to sort of the lower level confidence, pre-feasibility or feasibility, a quantity surveyor has looked at the assumptions that we have and the information that we know. They'll look at similar projects conducted elsewhere and they'll add a contingency, so a buffer. So the number that you look at is anticipated at this point in time to still be the full amount that would be required. It's very important that the next sort of round of work for us is to make sure that any of these that are looking to be early in the LTP that still are in feasibility stage progress before the LTP is finalised.
I suppose maybe just a comment on why we haven't folded co-funding or consequential OPEX into that. One, of course, co-funding is inherently uncertain, even with something that's traditionally been very certain like NZTA. We're starting to see some different, it's not landing where we think it might. And with the consequential OPEX, that is completely contingent on where in the program the capital investment lands. So we could really start to skew these things, and that's why we've suggested looking at them outside of this framework.
Yeah, so when you see the long list, you'll see consequential OPEX or revenue as annual. And then when you look at the options, the reason we were able to give it as this is the total is because in the options we assumed, we'll build it in year 7, and then once operational, we calculated the OPEX or the revenue from there.
This is really good.
Seems very proud of it.
Just,
Than our spreadsheet from last time.
just for clarity, the figures that are in the long list are the figures. They're not what our share would be if we did get co-funding. They're the actual.
They're the actual
The cost.
cost. They
Yeah.
assume that we're borrowing all of the
Yeah.
money, and where there's a probability of co-funding, if we secure it, that's it.
That's the bonus. Yes. Cool. Thank you.
Can I ask with that appendix table, what category is it in?
One, sorry.
Like appendix B transport I'm looking at. Which category is it sorted by?
It's sorted by, we just grouped them. So I think awards or by planning, toolkit investment. It's not sorted by any categories. All the categories come together to form the base case ranking that you see. So if they have, a myriad of.
Honestly, they're probably ordered by how Jesse cut and paste them.
There is no order. That's okay.
It seemed to almost be natural distribution of the value of some, that might have just been random.
Intuitive.
Yeah.
I think we've probably covered these additional considerations. Do you have any sort of questions or comments on that?
Yeah, the sheet in Excel, please.
So you can play with it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What we will do is very shortly we'll go live, so you can play with it in real time.
Much better than the spreadsheet.
Okay, moving along. Do I have this one? Okay. All right. So what we reflected on from LTP 24 was that inherently this kind of baseline and headroom approach makes sense. Although one of the things we heard from council at the time was there wasn't really, I think, for council enough insight or influence into how that baseline was built to feel like it truly reflected what council's baseline expenditure really was. So our response to that has been to actually give you a whole bunch of different levers you can pull to set the baseline. That helps us understand where your risk appetite is, what you do or don't want to see. So step one today is for us to start extracting where your non-negotiables are, those thresholds. And there's two ways we can do that. The first way is using each of these 5 categories. So you can say, you know, actually, level of service is incredibly important to us. We don't even want to tolerate a minor deterioration in service. Our baseline here is a 3. What that would have the effect of doing is every initiative that we've got that has scored a 3 or above against service performance would pull through as a must do.
Right.
So that's how those investment impact categories work, and I think that's where we should spend the bulk of our time today. But I'll be guided by you, of course. The other one that we've folded in, and granted it's a little clumsy, I was just at saturation point, is renewals. So in the previous baseline in LTP24, all renewals were considered baseline. What this allows you to do is say, actually, renewals baseline or not for us, and if they are, to what extent does an initiative need to be comprised of renewal in order to be baseline? So you could say if it's just a majority renewal, you could say anything that's set at 51% for a cost driver against renewal becomes baseline, right through to this has to be an exclusive renewal like for like in order to make baseline. So you've got sort of a full spectrum of choice there around how much renewal you would pull into the baseline if you wanted to have renewals in the baseline at all. What we can't do today, but we could go away and do, is have that set at different levels for different activity types. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. We set these parameters, we build a baseline of framed up on the whiteboard where I can document if you want some different scenarios built up. So actually we think this is where our baseline is, but we're really interested to see what happens if our baseline is actually set here. So when we come back to you, you can see the difference, the effect that had in terms of what was in, what was out, and what that does to your cost. Of course, after your baseline, you might still want to spend some more money on other things. That's where this kind of discretionary spend comes in, and the framework is intended to get a steer from you around the relative priorities. So on balance, is growth more important to us than level of service? Are some levels of service more important to us than other levels of service? Generally, does the distribution of costs from low to very high feel about right, or actually our expenditure appetite is really low and we want to pull that down? So they're kind of all the different levers you can pull there. That has the effect of moving initiatives between different cost ranges and across different impact levels, where they're sensitive to those changes. Make sense? So something might be sitting as a would do. We adjust the framework to reflect your strategic priorities. Its impact level moves up to high, and all of a sudden it becomes a should do. Make sense? With me?
It's becoming very sophisticated, which is great. But I feel like spinning the influence on the algorithm more so than the output. And I'm wondering if we'll put a lot of input into this, so then it'll spit out the other end and we'll go, I don't want that. So I'm just wondering.
That's the point.
We've
Yeah.
been to that next step. We have anticipated that might be where you landed today. So I think what's really important for us is to hear from you what direction you want to head in, and you know that kind of relativity. We can go away and manipulate things to say, you know, like these are the reasons why we set the inputs in this way. Has it delivered? Well, is the output what you were expecting to see? Does it actually reflect where you wanted it to land? And we can do a little bit of that live with you, so you can adjust the setting here today, and then we can show you what actually based on that change. So you can just start to get a feel for what would the implications of lowering our baseline threshold be.
And the first step of that, I think, is to actually look at the output and see if it's sensible and makes sense. Because if you do this and you move these levers and you go, I sort of understand why it's saying these are the priorities, then that's where, you know, what you're saying might come into play. But
So it's helping tie values with what you do, so it's not necessarily the same emotional, political overreach. It's actually having a was trying not to.
Phase one stuff last time, it just wasn't as sophisticated, there weren't as many inputs into it. Or maybe there were, we didn't see it, I don't know.
You didn't see it and it wasn't as sophisticated.
Yeah, a bit of both. Like, and I suppose, Cody, just to pick up on your point, like I said up top, this isn't making decisions for you. You can still get your capital plan option stack and go, yeah, I know this is still here as it could do. I know we're up against it with our debt ceiling. We still want to pull that forward and we're willing to trade these things that have performed better in the framework in order to do that. That will always be available to you, and you will always be able to see what those changes look like.
Yeah, which is what we didn't have before, right?
Yeah, and we'll make them really clear to you, so you will see how every iteration changed and what changes within that.
Okay, Quentin.
Yeah, so just in regard to that, the base case ranking thing. So, I mean, I suppose I'm struggling a little bit that, and I don't want to devalue any of them because they're all important, but, you know, that an AMP, an asset management plan is a must do, but a transport project is a defer or something like that. I mean, how do those
Yeah, I'm with you. So
value judgments get made? Because I mean, look, as I said, I don't want to devalue asset management. It's really important, but it's not the actual work. You know, it's not the water quality getting better or whatever. It's the
So I'm sure Ali would respond to this better than I would. I believe the only asset management plans that have pulled through as a must do are transport ones, and that's because we are required to do them, as opposed to, I'm pretty sure our asset management plans and other activities haven't.
Right, because you're saying there's a legislative must do.
Yeah,
right,
so
okay.
That's
It's a condition of funding for transport that from the agency that we have to provide a transport AMP and
right.
present the programs that we put forward.
That's fine. That answers that. But you know, the other thing that's evident to me is that it's every other transport project is effectively not discretionary, but it's in a maybe category of some sort. You know, at what point does transport become an essential infrastructure component that has to be done?
Well, I guess maybe we'll start to see that as we play around in real time with this and start to reflect some of your expectations. We've tried to be really agnostic on what we've put up. You know, I didn't want to come to you saying, actually, we've already set all of these different requirements across all these categories and you've got a massive baseline project and you can step back from this. I just made the assumption that you would want to comply with legislative requirements.
I think it's important to note that there aren't value judgments in here that have put things into the must do or not category. It's based on a quantitative, well, I mean, there's subjectivity in allocating it to these, scoring them within each of these categories, but that's been moderated internally to test that they've been put in the right place. So it's not like we've made a choice to say we think this project is must do. The must do comes out of applying this model in the way that they've talked through and that they'll work through with you.
So just to clarify, because obviously we've got all these rankings on here at the moment. Is that based on a particular score generically being chosen for each of those categories?
So probably a good opportunity to step back a little bit. The way that we built this up is all of our subject matter experts put up their initiatives, they self-scored. As a P&I leadership team, we then spent hours and hours reviewing and moderating to ensure there was consistency across activity types, to just make sure the relativity seemed about right. And as a consequence of that, actually some we lifted relative to what our SME said, and others I'm sure they completely disagreed with where we landed. So to some extent you have to kind of trust in the SMEs and the leadership team to get us through those inputs. But you know, all that information, we can always dig into it.
The irony, of course, is I'm now looking at how we simplify the complexity that you've created. Thanks, good.
I guess this is the tension that we've been walking with this LTP is perhaps last time we didn't bring you enough, this time maybe it's too much, but at least you get a little bit of insight into how we work, you get some influence over how it shakes out, and if it is too much, we won't bring you this level of detail.
I know, it's just right. We may not end up grappling with all of the detail, right? But we know you have, and so we've got some confidence that, you know, we've got the information in front of us that we need to make those trade-offs. I think, you know, it can be overwhelming, but we'll get our heads around it with time, you know.
No, it's not overwhelming. It's just going, how do we make these decisions of the trade-offs, right? So it's a case of everything legislative, park that, because we know we're going to do it. Let's look at the middle bit.
Well, true. You're trying to meet the needs of a diverse group anyway, so it's not easy. Good on you. But we've got to make our own Goldilocks, don't we? Too little last time, too much this time. But from it, we can create each. Yeah, maybe, you know. But even the things that we have to do, there are questions about how they are done. Not just, it's not a given that they're done the way it's currently, or it's been done in the past. There may be smarter ways of doing things.
But once you've got this model, it becomes simple.
And those, like I said, those choices will always exist for you. Whatever gets set in the LTP doesn't become a binding obligation. And the other thing we have been doing, I forgot to mention it earlier, is as we work through things, if we do think there is potentially a different way of funding or delivering or achieving something, we have flagged that. So we can also show you, kind of as we get a little bit further in the process, you know, here's kind of how your draft plan is shaping out, and we think there's a slice here that you can take a bit of risk on and rely on a different way of doing it.
Just out of interest, figures, have they had a relook recently? I was just specifically looking at a certain bridge that I'm thinking is a little bit underfunded.
Probably about 90% of the capital budgets in front of you have been reviewed by the QS. The exception to that are things more like our planning and renewals budgets, like Ken has said, although I would note the QS has also reviewed the unit rates. Predicated on a lot of assumptions.
Within 10%.
Yeah.
So the process that Jessie talked through a couple of slides ago with the QSs for all the projects,
the big ones.
Yeah, you're right. Well, for all of them except the planning and renewals budgets.
Yeah. And now a similar exercise is happening with community service budgets. So ultimately, everything that's capital will all go through the same QA process. We've got a big all-day session to moderate across different infrastructure types, and it will all come together at the same time.
One really specific question on the other risk, which is awesome having put that in. Thank you for throwing that lens across everything. I just know that the consequence table that you might have been working from treated water in a certain way, and it was about water supply, wasn't about environmental impacts on water. Just wondering if, I just wanted to flag up that that's something that I would change. We're working through that process at the moment of, you know, and it's going to take a while to maybe remove what's not in here. No, but that's my point, is that it's not just about three waters, it's the impact on our water bodies, you know, and that impacts our water services CCO, and that, so just the way we've treated water in the consequence table is more about water supply and health effects rather than the environmental impact on water, and I think we do need to think about that under our carbon biodiversity.
Flow effects.
Yeah,
it's a good pick up. When we were assigning a score for other risks, it was of all the risks that are in our mind in relation to this initiative, which ones are for, I guess, the most concerning people. But as we did that, we noted down if there were any other kind of key risks that we thought were relevant. So we should be able to quite quickly go back and say, you know, we can filter through and say, actually, if we applied a slightly different lens to, say, impacts on receiving water bodies, would that have then become the prevailing risk? So we can do that check.
Yeah. Did you use the consequence table for that, or did you look
Yes, we did.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, you know, that it's a blunt tool, and there are some parts of it that are excellent and perfect, and other bits that would need to be fleshed out. So that would be my only thing, is as an input, it might not be perfect.
The QEs that you refer to, is that in-house?
External RFP.
Right.
Right, shall we get into it?
Yeah.
Okay, you might need to share
My screen.
your screen and bring the model up.
Maybe before you do that, I'm not actually sure. So John's question about the attached care and categories and that, what's, maybe just explain the baseline kind of how the scoring has come together to result in, like, are there different, I think that was your question, John, is how have we got from the scores to they fall into these categories?
Yep. So
But-
there's been a uniform methodology.
Yeah.
That's
yeah, which is I think,
generated must do, could do, should do.
which is I think what's on the screen, but I don't think we talked through the detail of it. Yeah. Maybe just, maybe walk through the model, but explain it.
But I
Yeah.
suppose just what's happened is you would have seen those 5 categories and every initiative was scored against it. They come together to form one weighted impact score. And that score translates to whether it's in the low, moderate or high range and capital cost ranges. Very straightforward, right? And just probably as if you have enough levers to compensate, you can actually move things around as well. So if you feel like something that's got moderate impact and is very low cost should be in the prioritised bucket, we can change that one in real time as well.
Wow.
So how are they weighted? Sorry, that's probably in
They're
the
all
pack,
weighted
but
even,
they're weighted.
and that's something you can make choices about.
But then,
Don't give us too much.
Yeah,
Some of us are quite simple.
I was going to say the right brain part of this, I think that is maybe relevant is that at some point collating or collecting things into a group to tell a story is a really important part of this LTP in the same respect. I see a lot of items in there with like road crossings in Monaco, high impact, low cost, really meaningful stories. For us as politicians, we can say, well, we're wanting to prioritize safer crossings to the lake. The story that comes with the investment, which, maybe some road crossings are better than others, but that's just what I want other councils to keep in the back of their minds, is how is the narrative of what we're going to invest in really tie into a value structure from a story point of view, as much as a, analytical framework as well.
I guess the question is, do we focus on a few big numbers or lots and lots of small numbers? Because that's with what we could spend hours on each of these. Not that we should do, but
let's just see where we're at.
okay.
I really think in terms of what we would get the most out of today's offices in terms of building up the next iteration of the capital plan is what direction are we headed with the baseline, and are there any, does this kind of all levels of service are about equal importance? These different impact categories are about equal importance, or actually they're really not, and you've got some sort of collective viewpoint around that, or there's some different scenarios you want us to go and explore for you. I don't expect you to build those here and now today. I just thought it could be really useful to have this tool and show you how it works, so you can start to see how that direction that you give us translates to the action that we take.
One of the nuances I noticed about yesterday was that, the principle of keeping things simple, all agreed with completely. And then we went into the details of it, and then we wanted to, make it more complicated because then it was more fair. And so this thinking big and small element is actually quite difficult, because whilst we can, have a vision or have some shared agreement on the outcome, once you go into the detail, it can contradict itself. So just be mindful of that.
But also, if there's something that we want to question or talk about or understand why it is where it is, that also gives an opportunity to talk about our thinking, right? So it's some of it will be, it says that's a must do, I have no idea why it is a must do, so we this.
Let's have a conversation around it. Might just show you really quickly how this works with some kind of made up things just to see what happens. So Hannah, could you throw a 3 into growth? So you can look on your A3 in front of you and see what that is. But
And that screen, I'm just thinking that inside screen, is that extendable? Yeah, go along to the little, next to the down across from the cross,
Just next to the.
left up, left of the cross, left.
You're on the
That
left.
one.
On that one? No.
Yeah, that one. Right, let's make it bigger.
the other thing you can do is hide, take that away if you right click it.
You need to do it on your computer because you're sharing. Would you like them to have my first?
Yeah.
Did I do the one?
Just get a screen one. So just sorry, remove that three and then
That's better, thank you.
fill that. I want you to see here. So green represents your growth share of the cost drivers across all of the initiatives that are in the mustards. Purple, the renewal share, and the little blue.
Right.
So these are how your cost drivers come together cumulatively in each category.
Is that based on how the cost rates have been allocated in the last LGB?
No, for this,
The time refreshed? Yes, okay.
for every initiative. So now if we add a three, so you're saying actually our non-negotiables. Yeah, pretty, growth is important to us. Can you see how much that shifted in terms of your musters? The other thing we can do is go up to this table at the top, and what this is what was on the end of this. Where these cells are highlighted purple, you can see that that means the dollars in that category have increased as a consequence of that threshold that you just said. So compared to what you had in your pack around that long list or this base case that we gave you, by making a decision to set your threshold for growth at 3, you've added $723 million to the
Wow.
yeah. So we can play around today in real time, so you can just start to understand what the cost of your risk is.
And sorry, Jessie, is that over on the left there? You can also adjust the actual levels of service relative importance, which would affect that, or
Yeah.
do those not interrelate?
It does.
Yeah.
So if we Hannah, do you want to fill that 3 from the baseline?
But is this neutral to the revenue side though?
Yes.
Yeah.
It only deals with capital.
Because yeah, and I was just going to touch on this before because I'm not quite sure, because you know, if we assign more to growth than growth pays for growth, then we just recover more from growth. It should be how it works. But that's what in your first model, which is the one you've got there now, it just worried me that there's so little of the growth stuff was in the must do and should prioritize and should do, because it should be self-funding theoretically, notwithstanding the debt headroom. And but you know, if we've got to provide infrastructure for growth, surely that has to be prioritized on the basis that it pays for itself. And so I don't understand how why would they be so far down when we've got, you know, as I said, it's problem being neutral to the revenue side is that we have to.
So that's the reason we built this little cost drivers chart, so you can see actually, and I think when you look down to dollars, but you can see actually, yeah, that lifted our must-dos by $700 million, but it also 40–50% of that will be recovered from growth. So I know it's not everything you were perhaps hoping for, but it's a start. And the reason it's not showing in your must-do now is because it would be very unusual that just responding to a legislative obligation would have much of a growth component.
So I guess what Jessie's wanting to do with you now is to understand what levers you
you want to move to say things are in your baseline. We've done a minimal baseline here. And this is what the workshop was about, is to play around with this. Have you guys give Jessie things to play with to see what it does. And to then, so that Jessie can take away from this direction saying, actually, growth has to be included, or we have to maintain our levels of service, or, you know.
Just to be clear, this isn't our recommended baseline.
No.
It's just a base case that we
Yeah.
can benchmark the changes again.
And we're not saying it's growth all levels of service, you know, because it could be a mix of both. I think, though, and I think Quentin got it, you know, we do need to bear in mind how we're going to pay for it, right? So we can put things in there, knowing that if they are growth facing or supporting, then we've got a revenue stream other than rates.
And what
Or
Jessie,
we need to pay the operation cost and the interest and everything else.
what Jessie's model will show you is if it's only 50% growth,
Yeah.
and she adjusts that growth factor, it'll also add in the renewals and levels of service cost as well, because projects won't be 100% growth.
And we can't do it here today,
No.
but as a council, you can totally say if something's 80% growth, it's largely, you know, funded by future growth, go away and build us a lever just like we've got here for renewals. And we can go away, we can then set this, so anything that's above 80%, whatever it is, also for study base.
But it would have to link with other growth projects, because you can't do one part of the stuff that's needed for growth. If you, mind you, we're just on transport, aren't we? But we need to work in with water services CCO, because you can't do one piece because you won't get the growth to pay for it. It all needs, the whole package needs.
So we are being quite careful to capture all of our dependencies and the nature of the dependencies. So, you know, something might land here, but actually it's just not viable. We have to move it.
Just in terms of how we put level of service and growth, because we always go, well, there'll be a level of service uplift and therefore, you know, that's going to be funded by existing ratepayers. But what's the difference between consequential level of service from a growth project versus level of service being the cost driver? Do you see what I mean? Like if something is driven by growth, there may be a consequential uplift in level of service, but it's not the driver. And I just wonder about the way we are going about allocating those cost drivers.
Catherine might be a better place to answer that, because I'm not sure it is about the driver. I think it is that you have to take into account the consequential level of service impact under the legislation.
I don't, yeah, okay. Well,
But Catherine,
we don't need to go into it right now. I just in terms of what we then would put in, like if we're thinking other than transport, if we're thinking of, mind you, that all of those things have to, ignore them, just carry on.
Right, but if existing residents and ratepayers are already happy with the current level of service, but yes, improved level of service comes with the growth component, why should they be burdened with that?
Yeah.
When
And other councils have dealt with it that way. I've had a look at some of the stuff from that. Obviously, the Auditor General, they audited different councils dealt with allocating cross drivers, and some were you know, didn't take the consequential level of service and include that so that ratepayers covered it. They would just go whole growth, but there was a range. But I think
but that's one of the questions we posed to Natalie. So I don't,
okay.
because you've
That's
been raised in this setting a number of times. So that's one of the questions we've asked Natalie.
Yeah.
So the way these are being done is consistent with current policy and approach change. Just quickly, can we zoom out a little bit? I want to show you a different way this can influence how many things like. So if we change resilience, you hypothetically are saying resilience of our transport network is so much more important as a level of service than anything else. We can then multiply to it, and you can see how that's moved things around. So what's happened is it's shifted the Argus point which it could do, because it's sitting there because it's so expensive, into a strategic candidate, and it's lifted the $10 million with provision for vulnerable roads up a category, because the vulnerable roads and Argus Point Bridge respond to that level of service. So that's kind of how this works. So these 5 down here, we will set your thresholds. That's how we can start to build a baseline. Once we've kind of got that in place, this is where we start to make some adjustments to reflect your relative priorities.
But in what's in the transport, in a smooth travel experience and a reliable travel time, because they're quite, they sound quite similar, but,
Smooth travel experience. No, the transport person wants to talk.
I believe Jeremy might be online, but I think yeah, to me that might be related to the asset management, the quality of the service that you drive in relation to, and then the other part of this, the congestion of the
Right.
travel time is more related to the use
so
of it.
if reliable travel times, which we're hearing is a very big thing right now, if that was just one of the most important things, we change that to be a block 5, is that
You would only multiply it to,
right?
you're effectively doubling the
Okay.
score. But the other thing you can do is say service performance is more important as well.
Right.
So I would, just to manage that relativity, I would suggest you either say something as a standard level service. Actually, it's got a slightly, call it a moderate importance or a high importance.
So as you're prioritising one thing, do you have to deprioritise something else that comes there?
Not levels of service, but with your impact categories, all of these things need to come to 100% for one.
Right.
So if you say the service performance is the most important of these things, whatever we increase that by, we make a literature reduction together. So what are you trading?
Yeah, I mean, the scenario I'm thinking of at the moment is, let's just say we had an appetite to be more investing into modal shift and active travel and public transport networks, etc. Which means we may actually want to take some off roading, not prioritise something we must do, but some of those could do's move off, which have potentially high budgets associated with them. Just really trying to understand what we would get if we remove one big project, how much active travel, let's just say, projects can we get over the line as a result of that? Is that how it works?
This doesn't displace dollars, it just moves things between categories. So if you say there's alternative modality, it is more important to us than what might happen is that the project that are related to delivering those alternative modes might shift from a would do to a should do or prioritize. And then you'll see everything that sits in each of those and what the, double check this with my kids here, but presumably we can say together these prioritized things have this rating impact, this decent impact, and we can do that for each.
So just for that example there, if you're talking about active travel and all those things you talked about as being more of a priority for you than investments in roads, Jessie, would that be this alternative transport choices you'd go up on and reliable travel times you might go down on?
Yeah, so
Because the reliable travel times will be roading projects, is that right?
yeah, can you revert resilience to
Is it, or
one?
is it,
That one as well.
Yeah, and then alternative transport choices are. Yeah, so you see we get a movement here where we've had a $13 million worth of projects drop out of the quick do's and move into the sugar wood. So what we're saying is actually based on your priorities, you get better back.
Which is what I
Spending that money is worth that.
Let's go.
Maybe another tier down, but like, I'm just looking at the Queenstown Town Centre project upgrades, and cumulatively they're over $500 million, which is obviously more than a gondola would cost. But given that arterials 2 and 3 are on there, are there other projects that are sort of, if you do one, you have to do the other, like they're tied together in some regards?
So a good example of that would be arterial stage 2. So if you look at the property long list, we've got the replacement here. And in its own right, that does not seem to stack up with the good investment. It's a lot of money, it's not too good to be replaced, it was fine. However, current design tells us we need to move it out of the way to put the road there. So what we will do is say, actually, if the arterial structure is a real priority for you, then automatically that QLDC replacement must come in and go first. It's considered a critical enabler.
Right.
And I think if Tony Pickard was here, he would say that that package of town centre investments are a program that together work together to improve the transport outcomes for the town centre and Fernhill. So he would say that doing one of those things, you get, in terms of the value for the investment, doesn't stack up. You get the benefit when you look at the whole. But that is something that we're refreshing the information on, because obviously some of the town centre works in the existing arterial, that work has been done. And so there will be some work to kind of validate the incremental benefit of the rest of that program.
Because just updating the Church Street streetscapes, you know, is, I mean, surely that doesn't need to be done, but you could still do the Stanley Street cluster. Because they're all sort of in there.
Yeah, so it's one of the reasons we did break the down and put them in as independent projects, so you can make them responsive. I'm sure like the secretary would say we need to invest in the whole program to unlock the benefits, but actually maybe you just want to go on that.
And there might be some that are more impactful than others. That might be one that is less impactful, but the Shotover upgrades still in there, Shotover Street. The changes to Shotover Street.
Street upgrades, yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they're
more
part
impactful.
of stage 2 downtown street upgrades. They're part of that.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
so there are interrelationships between the programs.
Quite. So this is something that's come up in conversations around bigger picture transport, that others would have a part in that for some of them to be viable. And yeah, in the short term and then into the longer term, that initially we should be looking at a minimum viable product, something that makes a difference now, that is affordable and fundable, and then you add to it as you go. Don't lump the whole thing in, because when you do, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So so what you're talking about there is something that we own, conceptually, and although there's other funders to it, but yeah, what are the bits that we could do that would make a difference, that are to make it work, that I have to do within it, and then the others we should do later.
Yes. So we need to be able to give you that information in terms of the incremental benefit.
Yeah.
Quentin, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, we're going to have to test those transport interventions differently. I mean, notwithstanding the town centre stuff around Stanley Street and Athol Street and the interchange clearly has a, you know, a transport benefit in terms of public transport function and the like, and that was the whole purpose of Arterials 1. So, but you know, we talked about this at this mayoral task force group the other day. I mean, I just instinctively, and it will be interesting to see what the network review and the strategic network plan comes out with NZTA this week. But I do struggle with the arterials at 200 and whatever $60 million or something. I think we're in political trouble with that, if nothing else. So.
Thanks.
Yeah.
My question was, so if we are saying that some of those projects depend on other projects, but is there a way of testing that or adjusting that? Because the example you used of the Memorial Centre in Aotearoa 2, you know, that's only one way that Aotearoa 2 could be delivered. There is another way that it could be delivered without
I think
placing them.
we could try and build the model that's smart. I'm not sure if I want to make that promise, but I think it would be, that's the kind of thing that would really warrant doing a bit more of a deep dive in these initiative A3s that come to you. So actually we can start to say, how do these things fit together? What's the optionality around them?
Because we're notwithstanding what Quentin said, whether Aotearoa 2 and 3 are even still in the mix. But you know, does that then come down to the fact that we can, you know, override what the numbers are saying as a group of 12 people and say, well, actually, we want this one to happen before that one happens in a different way.
Totally say to officers, go away and figure out if you can deliver it for that budget, and if you can't, we don't want to do it.
Or to do only these projects and not those ones.
Yeah.
I don't want to pick on that one project, but you know,
No, I think
yes,
it's a good one to pick up.
also the work that's been done at one end of it. There's a lot of work to do at one other end of it. There's a bit of work that's been done in the middle part of it, and there's a little bit of work that could be done to link this end and the middle of it without doing a whole lot of other work that doesn't necessarily need to be
Yeah.
We do have that in this project. We'll just close that.
So, yeah, whether it's a priority or not is a bigger discussion, but this is how we deliver this.
I think there's also something there about the timing of those projects and whether we do that now to feed into this, or whether that is the work that gets prioritised in the first year of the LTP, is taking the transport network plan, giving the into the regional deal process, into the the broader process with the transport task force, to have a more fulsome plan to then take into a full, where it won't be the whole transport program, but there's components of it that are part of that, where you're then doing the business case processes and all of that, which will flush out those things. But we're not scheduling them until down here anyway. And so it's okay to, so there's a question about whether we try and answer that now, or whether you put money to get a robust answer in the first year.
Yeah.
And just put them in there in the meantime, or not,
Yeah.
while you determine that.
Yeah,
Just
it's
thinking,
probably
10 minutes ago, Matt was really activated to get into it, so should we get into it? Should we
But I'm only one of 12, you see. Just cherry picking one of the line by line or something.
No, I think what you should do is see if you could get into a conversation about setting some thresholds for your baseline and whether you're talking about.
Can you just explain that how, is it 1 to 5 for that red baseline? Is that what are we putting numbers 1 to 5 against it, and we're trying to
so
agree?
What you would do is you've got this one in front of you, right?
Yeah.
And you can see, if we just look at the top under your obligation level, if you set that at a 5, you're saying anything that's required by legislation or regulation, or as in a contract we will not be able to get out of, is our non-negotiable. Anything below that is up for discussion or debate. You'd set that at a 5. Or conversely, you might say, actually, we're really committed to all of these plans and policies and strategies that we've signed off in the last 3 years, and they're our bottom line. You'd set that at a 3. Does that make sense? Yeah. And you can say, actually, we don't have some of these categories, we don't have a bottom line. Everything's up for discussion. You just leave it.
Can I ask what, I've just looked at a couple of projects. I'm just thinking of what lever do we pull? Do you have any idea of what made Arthur's Point Bridge pop out at a could do, but the arterials also pop out at a could do? Those were that's where I can't understand and which we would pull to change that, so that Arthur's Point Bridge rose to the top and the arterials went down. Like just as a just as a, is there something?
Help you contextualize it.
Yeah, because there's clearly the Arthur's Point Bridge needs done. I think the arterial clearly doesn't need done. From a, people might fall off the bridge kind of thing, or we might have shake and we might not be able to use it.
That baseline evidence was Skipper's a must do.
Yeah.
It's a good question. So the reason Skipper's flagged as a must do at the moment is by that little non-negotiable at the bottom that says any renewal that's allocated 100%. So it is a like for like. We're not making any level of service improvement. It's a straight renewal. That's pulling through.
So to his question, I was a little bit confused by the Skipper's piece too, because I think it's the level of service right now is 0. And if you contrast that with Edith Cavell, at least we've got some service.
So it's set currently at 100% renewal, because our assumption in setting the budget is that we would do it like for like. We wouldn't improve the level of service.
Okay.
And that will be main versus a one-line.
Well, the other piece, which is totally separate, is if we contrast the arterial with Edith Cavell, the arterial can be done incrementally. That's where it's really safe. If we can just do it incrementally and we can just pull back for a year or two. Edith Cavell, it's digital. Once we start, we must finish. And it's a big nut.
So the arterial has actually been split, so you can make choices about which stages do or don't go ahead. You might say, actually, we do want everything that's a like-for-like renewal to be the baseline, and then go through and say, yeah, that of those, we don't actually think skippers are must do, pull it out. We can do that. So this is kind of like the 80-20. In terms of your question about what would pull Arthur's Point up and keep arterial where it is or whatever, you saw that happen when we said actually resilience is really important to get a level of service. Immediately that elevated Arthur's Point Bridge, it didn't elevate the arterial.
Yeah.
Because the arterial doesn't have a resilience, well, that's not what's driving it. What is driving Arthur's Point Bridge is resilience of the network.
Yeah.
I would suggest maybe we go and
Try.
take some of the priorities and then have a look at what that's meant in terms of the list of projects, because then that way you'll be able to see how some of those choices impacted the list.
Okay,
It's good.
obligation level, let's start there.
So currently we have everything that has an obligation level 5 as a must do. And the 100% renewal. So you could start by looking at the must do's and telling us, do they all feel like must do's? Does anything that you see on the list feel like a must do that isn't a must do?
Yeah, okay, that's a good start. Thank you.
So, question on that. So you've got the transfer station is a must do, 18 million. We've got the transfer station there at the moment, right? I don't know, but so
You've caught us. And so we set that in a fund in anticipation of that having been contracted by the time this LTP period starts.
Right, it has been.
So it's currently in that process, yeah.
Yeah, so you will make a decision before LTP 27 kicks in that makes that a must do or not.
Right.
Or I think that you would.
Because we've started the procurement process.
So we did make a very specific note about that. This,
so
that's,
it's into that contractual, that's right.
yes.
Yeah, right.
Do you want to actually go and filter by minister?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I mean, I feel like it's.
Possibly chip in with something. Sorry to speak over the top. I didn't want the conversation to move on a bit too far before I managed to say this. I think that what I just wanted to make the point that the team has presented you something that gives you absolute logic when you are approaching this list, right? But it is still within your prerogative to blow the logic up and say, we just love this project and it has to happen. So I think, yes, it's great. I love that you're all engaging with how can we make the Edith Cavell Bridge come up to the top of the list. Equally, there are plenty of councillors all over the country who will just say, just make this one happen. So if it's, if there are key projects that we need to go away and think about, okay, how does this fit in the mix? We will just take that direction. You don't need to do the intellectual leaps to work out how it can filter through the model necessarily.
It was just a wondering what drove the.
Yeah,
Yes, I
it's
agree.
great.
Yeah, I totally get
It's good to understand, but equally you're the politician. So if you have a priority that you need to see at the top, just give that direction.
So what you can see on the screen is that Hannah's filtered by everything that's might be a bit easier than trying to filter through your pre-reading, everything that's currently a must do, and almost all of them are renewals. So that is the consequence of having that renewal non-negotiable or threshold set at 100%. There's a couple that I can draw your attention to that aren't small water supplies. That's a compliance. So that's there because of that obligation being.
So I don't mind the obligation number 5, but how the renewals thing, how would we, I can't get my head around that. For example, with the Edith Cavell, I'm like, why would we want to renew it like for like, or even in general, sometimes around the district, we're growing. So like for like is not always going to be enough. So how do we change what would be 100% go down to lower? Is that what you
So we can change it. So you can say, actually, we just expect something to be primarily a renewal in order for it to be baseline.
So if we change that percentage to something else, like if it's 75%
Yeah.
renewal, then it comes through as must do. So that's what you can change in the model.
Yeah, then you change it and you see what.
So I
I can tell you now, after this point, which one comes through, it's 40% renewal, thereabouts.
And I can show
I'm
you.
not saying that I'm going to do that, but I just think overall we need to. Most of our stuff is going to be more than. Like,
This is where
This is where the internet can't necessarily.
So this
capture
is
some.
where there's, you know, the thing that is driving us to need to replace it is renewal based. But because we're replacing it, it's a once in a, you know, generation replacement.
Yeah.
We need to future proof it, which results in level of service. It's mostly then level of service and growth in terms of the investment we're putting into it. Yeah. Yeah. Even though the reason we're doing it is a renewal.
So if you killed that renewal component, you just said actually all of our renewals are up for discussion, and then go back to that moderating workbook can refill.
Yeah, so these are all the ones that changed. They were must do when they come out. So
now they're different.
Yeah.
So it was the fact that they're allocated 100% cost driver as a starting assumption that was forcing them in. I do wonder if we might want to start thinking more at the obligation and service performance end of the spectrum. I suspect the reality is you're going to end up landing on a we want to renewal of our expense anyway, and how we can affect that we can deal with behind the scenes.
So if we put 100% back in, then you have a look at what you might want to do with on service performance or obligation level to start with.
Start doing something.
Yeah. Well, I already said I'd like 5 for obligation. I think, how can you not?
Pause, pause in the room. 3 over here.
I think we should start.
Service performance.
No, but this
Service performance
here,
is
you get everything above as well. So by dropping the number down.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
And you're including more things.
Yeah, you're including more things.
You're unnecessarily constraining yourself potentially to things that.
Okay.
I would say 4, because we can change this once we've done the rest, right? Can be. That's one thing 5 is good little thing.
let me just, so I changed it to a 4 just so you can see anything that changes.
Keep them and then come up with.
So it just changes transport model upgrade. Oh, it's a bit slow.
Stop talking, it's pending.
Didn't like 4.
Let's put some metrics in and then have.
Yeah,
nervous.
Oh, I think we're zoomed in.
Zero, just trying to.
sorry.
Put it there, let's. Fantastic.
No,
Love
just saying.
Let's do so.
Okay, go to the next one then.
Do you want to suck it apart? Yeah.
No, maybe what happens if you change it to a 3?
A 3.
So what 3 brings in is things related to delivering on a committed strategy or policy that the council has approved in the last 3 years.
Get your wallets out.
Yeah, totally.
So that had the effect of
Which colour changes?
So these are all changes. So this is base case.
What they were in the base case when you only had obligation at the time.
Right, and now they're all must do's.
And now they're all.
No, that's not going to work.
Do we have a cost of that change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and the cost of doing that is. There's no.
Drum roll, please.
Yeah.
Figure increase.
There goes your rates increase.
$416 million.
Extra.
Chump change.
Sorry, the variance is that added to
$253 million over 10 years.
Easy, this is. Yeah, let's do it.
And so there's a question for you about actually, just, you know, initially, general direction, would we be willing to spend $250 million honouring the strategies and policies?
How much of that is growth and how much of it is not?
20.
So quarter of that is growth.
Yeah, sorry, I mean, that's just a massive extra rating.
I like it. But it's capital, it's 25.
So that was at one grade though, right? Can we put it in 4 and then let's go to the next one?
Okay, yeah.
Middle.
Instead of
Can I just-
involves every single change you make, let's sense a period and then have a look.
Yeah.
Okay, cut out the projects now.
So just, I
I've got to go and follow it.
so the 3 here in terms of delivering on adopted strategies and plans, in the case of transport, does that include existing business cases, the mode shift plan, the spatial plan?
No, but only because they're older than 3 years.
Okay.
So I might have 2 obligations.
So that includes things like pick up on your obligations under the WDA. Yeah, you signed that off last year. There's a whole bunch of actions and investments you need to make to get effect to it. By setting that at 3, you've pulled them into.
What's the consequential OPEX? Does it tell you that?
I think leave it at a 4. Okay, service performance, let's go.
5.
Significant and persistent degradation.
This is where we're at now. So what this, just to make sure I'm really clear around this one, this isn't about level of service degradation as a consequence of growth. That's measured under growth. So if you expect a level of service to start reducing as a consequence of more users and more demand, we pick it up under growth. This is about actually we already have a system deficit. Or if we don't invest, we will get a deficit irrespective of the growth.
And how do we change that to different categories? So we might not want degradation on roads for safety purposes, but we might not mind a bit of slippage in other areas. Too tricky? That's okay.
Is that what you're
It can be done, it just can't be done
Yeah.
yet.
That's fine.
That's almost 3.
Well, that's
If you read
correct.
3 on it,
Yeah.
it's kind of.
So this one is 1 best and 5 worst.
So actually, if you ask for something about getting a new level of service, so gas, for example, that would be set at a brand new level of service.
So I think 3 is probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that brings all our policies into
Try 3 then. 3 now.
2 is doing more than what our policy.
Yeah. So in this category, 1 is the best.
1 is doing lots of new stuff.
So
Yeah.
And in the last category, 5 is doing everything. 1 is doing.
No,
But
no,
Mine's just.
but the-
we're up to 900 million extra.
For
Oh,
all
it's
of
1 is
them,
way.
5 is the highest investment need. So
Okay, it's got a 1 on that one.
so a 3 in service performance increases your must-dos to 800 by 800 million.
Come back to that.
wow.
Don't-
Wait, but if it's compounding, right, that picks up the 250
Yeah,
we already
okay.
had. So-
Yeah, sorry, I can
Don't
isolate.
keep them on.
No, no, just
So
go.
on its own, similar.
You spend about 500 seconds.
Doesn't have to be fun. I want to see the fun
The extent to which investment is required to support.
Simplicity is going to fund everything. Much as your reason.
I think if I may, if you are feeling like there might be some levels of service where you are willing to tolerate some degradation, and some that you,
Yeah.
you know, would feel like more of a baseline, I would suggest you would set this quite high for
And then go through the list and what is your gut say? Yeah, and that's what I think we need to, I mean, to me, it's a case of going, what's the community been saying to us around what it wants and what it doesn't want? And, you know, there might only be a couple that we drop from from your list, you know, where we've started, but, and then go through the list and.
I'll tell you what we'll do, if we get there today with your relative importance of service levels, we can go away and build a few different scenarios.
Yeah.
So you seem to set a non-negotiable. So if you've told us access to alternate transport modalities is a level of service we're not willing to tolerate any degradation in, we'll go away and build you that scenario to see what happens if we can see it.
Yeah, instead of trying to do it and read it on here, maybe we just look at your lines and give you some steer as to what to pop out in the next spreadsheet.
So how you're feeling about your 3 as the baseline for service performance?
I think we're going to go up to 4 or 5.
So it's expensive.
Yeah,
I should have felt very expensive.
That's why we're going up to 4 or 5. Yeah, it drops it down.
Yeah.
So not feeling good about the 3 is what the answer is.
Yeah.
A lot of money to spend on correcting a minor deterioration.
Yep.
So yes. 4 or 5.
I got and then do the sense check of the list.
The 5, well, you look at the top line, I mean, suggesting that we would be prepared to countenance significant and persistent degradation of services mean we're not meeting our statutory obligations. We have to continue to provide our services at the level that our communities and the government expects us to. So how can we suggest that we're going to accept a level of service that's not acceptable?
Well,
we have to be
the impact of that might be that you have to reduce the agreed level of service. There's areas right now where we're not meeting our level of service. That will come in when you talk about community services, because we have a significant number of community services that are currently well under the stated service, performance levels. So if we end up with a scenario here where we're agreeing, that might flow through then to the level of service conversation you have in subsequent meetings where it might change something. Or it might not, because they might not be.
We have to do that. I mean, we're going to be faced with, and I think we've suggested that we want to have 4% cap, even though it doesn't apply straight away. If we want to do things like the Edith Cabell Bridge, I mean, there are things that are, potentially life-threatening, that we have to do. And yes, for a bit of time, level of service might have to decrease. I mean, we can't with the DIA measures, can we? Like, we have to make certain ones.
Yeah.
But
Compliance measures are different, but yeah.
So compliance measures, have they gone into obligation level?
Yes.
And are they at 5?
No, I don't think they have.
No.
Well, if something is a compliance matter.
If it's a compliance matter, sure.
Yeah.
The flip side of this, though, having gone through the process, once we eventually do, if it demonstrates that doing what we need to do and should do affordably means that the quality of service is going to degrade significantly, then that's a very good argument to take that to government and say, well, this just doesn't work.
Yeah. Or maybe
That's a persuasion to up the rates.
with a changing climate, with so much
Or
pressure on
other-
businesses, we have to accept a level of service. Maybe our communities have to start thinking about that.
Or other finance, other funding mechanisms.
But these are the decisions that you have to make in this process.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
Carry on.
Yeah, it's not-
Yeah.
We went back to 5.
I thought we were sticking with 4 for obligation.
4? Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to see how many changed for service.
I mean, 4 reads right, doesn't it? It reads like we're pushing the. It's just what you're saying.
Yeah, but then
It was a minor movement.
Yeah, and I think, remember, if you don't put something in the baseline, it's not like it disappears. You'll still have a conversation about it, whether you want to invest in it or not. It's just not something that will price up as your non-negotiable program.
Yeah, that's right. So we have to think about this as non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So
We will
significantly
spend this money no matter what it costs.
But if we have it at 5, it just means that an emerging risk to reliable service delivery might not be an absolute must, but we can go through the list because some of them might be, in our view, a must, but others might be not. So 5 makes sense. Yeah.
I'm just not as desperate
just
need to be a cat herder.
Okay, Quentin?
Go ahead.
Please do.
Please go.
Can I make suggest that? Sorry, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I was touching on John's point about, I mean, the first thing we do is should be doing is agreeing to the level of services. They're either statutory or that we agree them. And then, and then working backwards from there. But I still struggle with this idea that we're choosing whether we provide for growth. I mean, the baseline is we have to respond to growth by achieving the level of service that's required, and it pays for itself. So and if we're not doing that, I still don't know why not, because that's like I've said before, that's the bit that I still haven't reconcile. Why are we making decisions not to provide for growth?
How much growth?
So
Paying for-
that's a great
We haven't
way.
talked about it yet.
Yeah, so let's move on to
Well,
growth.
I know, but
Let's move on to growth, and you guys can give us some direction about where you want to try that level at. So what do you want Tuesday and Hannah to plug into the model here for growth?
5 is the highest.
4.
That means we want to address significant forecast shortfall within a zoned area.
Yes, we've got historic shortfall we need to somewhat make up for at least, but also going forward.
Cost.
Yeah, and that this would come from DCs or DOs. So the more we put in here, given yesterday's conversation, we're going to remain consistent with that. This should be the most we can get.
Or enables development in a priority area not yet zoned. And that might be a step too far.
You should see the screen increase.
Yeah, that's what we want to see, was we agreed yesterday pretty much.
So priority growth area not yet zoned
Yep.
is the spatial plan. So that would be the southern corridor parts that haven't yet been zoned.
Southwest Wanaka.
Southwest Wanaka. So 4 is basically delivering consistent with our spatial plan. It's staying in line with our
And
spatial plan.
it goes to the point that our agreed levels of service only apply to those areas which were planned for, and that allows us to then say, well, we're not expected to provide levels of service in growth areas we haven't planned for, in the fast track areas. So it gives us,
So what's on screen at the moment is that 1 for obligation, 5 for obligation, 5 for service, and a 4 for growth.
No, it's 4 for obligation.
Okay.
So I think we could maybe finish building this profile and then I could show everything
Yeah.
that now
Yeah.
let's do.
Let's keep going.
And we can see if it feels like
Yeah.
us do.
So what have we gone for growth?
4. Presently at a 4. I think the key difference between a 3 and a 4 is how negotiable your response or reaction to out of sequence development is.
So 3, we would provide, assume we're providing more,
Yes.
which we now have permission to do so for any new out of sequence fast tracks. And that would mean we'd be short circuiting the requirement to consult, etc. So 3 would be different. The 3 gives us more growth than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're non-negotiable. I guess the question is it?
It should be negotiable. Yeah, absolutely.
What happens if you drop it to a 3, Hannah?
The 3 mates.
That's like it.
Servicing fast track.
Yep.
A must do.
Yeah, well, we have.
Yeah, that's it. That's what 3 is.
Otherwise, otherwise the ratepayers award there's other impacts. So I'd be.
You're saying if you don't put the amount in the plan,
No.
you can't collect,
That's
and it'll happen anyway.
Yep. Right. Finance.
Is that, sorry, GC and Hannah, is that what 3 means then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
The other thing it picks up is where you have a growth pressure in an area that's not a
Yeah.
priority growth area.
Yeah.
So you've got
For-
an emerging growth pressure in Uppers Point. The 3 would pick that up as well.
Quite, but for the government, everywhere's a priority growth area. They don't.
In this context, we scored it based on a priority growth area as defined by the
Quite, but that's not the reality we're dealing with.
I don't think we have any projects on this list that we have put on here to respond to fast tracks.
No.
So the out of sequence development here is existing development proposals and work in the pipeline that is already happening outside of that, like Uppers Point.
Or
Right.
honestly, where we
Question mark.
have reasonably anticipated a fast
Right.
track.
But it's only nominal anyway.
So does that mean 4 aligns with what you've just said?
No, 3.
3. Yeah. Cool.
We can test it. We might as well
Yeah,
get going
yeah,
and test it,
financial.
and then we can just find. So we're gonna future capital.
So financial impact is you invest now to avoid paying more later.
Right.
So this is the impact of not investing.
Yeah.
Correct. So you invest your capital up front to resurface the road, or you save on that capital
Right.
expenditure now and you pay more to
Yeah.
react to more potholes and do a more expensive rehab later. Which is something we've never looked at before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2.
Wow.
Let's
can, that's the opposite, isn't it? Kicking the
Yeah,
can's
what
five.
are you spending money?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Oh, oh, it's a reverse number.
So the higher the number, the more needed for the investment. So the lower you guys go in making it a non-negotiable, the more you're
The
adding.
more, yeah, exactly.
So kicking the can.
Kicking the can,
But yeah, kicking the can would be a 5, and then a 1 would be we're being extremely risk averse to this financial impact, including everything.
yeah, right.
I'd be leaning towards the top end.
Yeah.
And the bottom end.
So 5 is we include it if not including it has a significant financial impact down the track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A 1 is we include it even if it's only a minor financial.
Oh, yeah, okay, let's go for 5.
Yep.
5 is bad.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, 5 is we're forcing it in because we're including the project as a must do, because if we don't, there's a significant financial implication coming. That's what we're doing.
yeah, so,
Whereas a 1 is we have put it as a must do, even though there's only a minor financial impact of not doing it.
it's just reversed to the other ones in my
Yeah, that's true.
head. It doesn't seem to make
But
sense.
that's because
does
it's fine.
But that's just the system, so let's
Okay.
go with it.
Probably just a flag our model's not perfect, all of these things should be tallying to 100%. But they're not.
Oh, yeah.
So I've got a few parts to go
Right.
with.
But we're looking at that section, so you're okay. They do colour someone.
You might wonder why, everything is dropped out of there.
It just means there's nothing anymore in should do.
So what happens if you put?
It's finished, we've got one more to go. We've got one more to go.
The rest do nothing.
Did you know the one that 5?
Yeah, I'm
One, oh,
No,
fine.
I think we're on the 5.
Fine.
Yeah.
I think
Financial
there's
impact,
a lot
not
of
a 1, that's a sure.
Yeah,
That's
because a
better.
1
Thank you.
was a,
Yeah, that's more balanced.
Billion.
Um,
Of
Yeah.
experience.
That's
only seen that in some bills. Million, that's
so I'm happy with the 5 for risk too.
I don't think anything's got a 5.
I mean, our,
Oh, okay, then.
Yeah.
You don't have to set this, you know,
You're
you might say, actually, there's nothing that we're not.
Both financial impact and risk, I would consider not impact, so just setting anything, looking at them separately.
so if you pick 5, it would be the riskiest.
Well, if you don't put it blank, it would be.
5 would imply the greatest risk.
Yeah,
If
It
you put
would
it,
say responding to the greatest risk is not
It
negotiable.
would imply the greatest unforeseen risk.
Yes. Whereas leaving it blank would say, actually, any
blank is
residual
0.
risk is up for discussion. Because we have only assessed other risk, being cognizant of all the risks that for these.
I mean, given the consequence table and where it's at, and it's probably okay to go higher.
Am I hearing a 5? Going
I
on,
don't know, 4. I was like very high, it's probably a little bit. Very high risk, really?
I was thinking
4?
a 4 didn't move anything, so that
didn't
probably
move
means everything that's scored a 4 or above has already been picked up.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Change.
But then that's okay, because that's our baseline,
Yeah.
so.
What pops out? What pops out?
So what pops out is you've just spent $932 million on baseline and property and infrastructure.
And what was it when it was all 5s?
When it was the base case.
Yeah, the base case that you put,
It was,
when everything was a 5 or whatever.
No, we didn't do that. The base case was that you only pushed into must-dos the obligations at a 5 level and 100% renewals. That was the base,
Which is the list that we had in the
That's
pack.
what I'm trying to.
your original must-dos.
So you've effectively added $770
Over 10 years, 70 million a year.
And so I think what would be a useful, I guess, dialogue just for a couple of minutes is, does that feel about right? Does that feel like that level of non-negotiable is worth spending that kind of money on? Or are we being?
I think we need to go back through and pull things out because things like the arterial is still in there. I mean, that could save us an awful lot.
What we'll do is we'll knock that one as a base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't look at it, yeah.
No, it's a base.
But it's
That's a
start.
total capital program of over 10 years of 900 whatever million.
No, that was just the extra. It wasn't the total.
No,
it was the
it's
The variance was
Just the baseline. Yep, so just the musters, total under
It's
900.
It'll be original
over
base.
10 years.
Over 10 years.
Yes, baseline.
Good. No,
This
that's
is only
good as
property and infrastructure. This doesn't include any, energy services, any social infrastructure or natural infrastructure.
Saving money for that one.
Got to be self-funded.
You're getting yourself killed.
Again, 2 years early.
Okay, but you're right. Money from.
Don't need it.
It's a lot of money when only 40% is growth.
It's gonna be that much money in the New Zealand economy. Just to keep savings. We're not gonna pay for any of that.
You wanna, which one's changed? Or I was even just thinking we could put a balance filter on it, so over in column AE, we could filter by anything over, I don't know, what an interesting 10 million.
Yeah.
What do you think? Fascinating, it pulled through the arterial.
But is the arterial still stacked up? Because it feels like something else.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you'd have to deliver 2 and 3, otherwise there's no benefit.
That would suggest there's a marginal benefit of just opening up the alignment.
What is it?
That's right. There's some, I'm saying, some of the stuff could be done that would make a difference, but not spend all of it.
It's 550 million.
Yeah, spend 150.
We don't have a budget in there to dedicate to gondola stations.
It's great because I'll be able to get through town quicker to make up for time that I'll have to go slower up the Northern Road because of the speed limit.
Yeah.
So it's
We've made it up.
what we're doing. Sorry, for a quarter of the budget price.
That's it.
Sounds like a lot of money.
Because the value
Once
is
you get out.
moving people smoothly. It's not moving people through private cars.
But we're not paying for gondola stations. It would be, the operator would pay us to use our land.
Even better.
And we use it to improve other transport infrastructure.
Why they're not out there digging holes already, I don't know.
I had a different approach to this, just wanted to daylight. I think all the must-dos that you've got, I agree completely. I think we need to make sure that we cover renewals before we do anything else. I think all of the should-dos, I agree with all of them but Pigeon Island. I think we need to spend 170 grand on a jetty there. And then the could-dos, there's like a few solar, Lynch block, prep for sale, Edith Cavell, Wanaka Airport, EOC, that kind of stuff.
EOC.
Sorry, I'm saying that would be a good investment.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, I agree with must-dos, I agree with most of the should-dos, and then there's a few of the could-dos that I feel like would be really meaningful investments that would reflect the values.
On the current list that we had before.
On the current list,
changed all the
yeah.
settings.
Well, no, the one that's in the, pack, essentially, that you've gone through and done yourself.
Before we changed
The original base.
So I think the revenue side of this is probably important to go back to that when we come back next time, because if you just start at the top of this list, 3 of them are parking, 2 of them at least, are parking facilities, which will have significant revenue streams.
No, we assume they won't be us.
Well,
So in here, they come through with 0 cost.
they should be putting some makeup on, just washing your face.
No, we don't have consequential.
No, that's right.
Yeah, but we haven't assumed that the organisation will have a revenue stream from them.
No, that's what I'm saying. So they've come through in a total of 900 million though, but with no recognition that they wash their own face.
Well, that's the irony, right? Yeah, because it's,
Can I ask a question on the parking buildings? So how do we model we pay for something, build it and get some revenue, hopefully, assuming our costs don't go, compared to leasing the land and getting some revenue for land for somebody else to build a parking meter? Because some might be the same, the net benefit might be the same, it's just we don't have the whole Capex tied up. We don't own the building, okay, but we haven't had to pay for it. So that's that sort of.
Or we could own it in 99 years.
Yeah.
I guess this is the tension you have, you can't auctioneer every line item.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
RTP,
okay.
But what you could say is this is why we want to do a deep dive in. Once understand just at a high level what the different mechanisms for achieving these parking buildings or that capacity could be, and can support it on this basis.
Same with arterials. So if the arterials, by October, we can consider, or at least begin the application to put in place time of use charging. Pay for itself.
I don't know if it's true. There's also solar would pay itself there. The Lynch block would pay itself because it's repairing for sale.
Yep.
Wanaka Airport would provide higher revenue. There's other things outside of parking that provide revenue.
Sure.
But that's again part of why I think that those become higher priorities for me as well.
We need that part of the equation.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Could we consolidate the must-dos under that scenario? Is that, could they get pulled out into it? Oh, just like
Sort by-
sort out and just go chuck the must-dos to the top or something so we can see what
They are.
Yeah, so we're.
Oh, sorry.
We're
Okay.
looking at just must-dos and we've
Base
also
case uses.
Oh, well, I see.
Right.
highest to lowest.
Town centre parking buildings.
So you indicated in the pack that you
No.
briefings, further briefings on specific projects.
But we've committed to that.
We grab a couple.
Recent
Town centre parking building.
We need a parking building.
Why would we be putting in a gondola and doing all that if we're going to bring more cars in?
Because the only,
Doesn't make sense.
it does, that all of them, well, all of these transport proposals are necessary to be able to free up transport. So now whether parking buildings are needed in town per se is another story, but
Yeah.
once.
Town centre parking building.
So the previous work done on the transport network indicated that.
Yeah.
The transport network plan's being refreshed at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving
There's a lot of
parts when you do transport planning. So rather than getting into the detail of that though, the transport network plan will come back to you before you have to agree this program.
Must do stage.
The question is it needed or is it wanted? And I think the answer is it's a huge, we've heard many, many times and frequently from our community, there were more parking. Now, whether it is the right thing to do or not, that's our decision. But what are we being asked for all the time is more parking.
Quite, but and the trade-off with that is pedestrianised areas that would make, so there's a whole lot of conversations we need to have here. And in particular, if there's investments that are going to be self-funding, then surely that is part of the equation we need to consider.
Can we scroll down?
Can I suggest, however, that what I think you are negotiating with things right now, right? So I think your non-negotiables are possibly not allowed to come here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is non-negotiable.
These don't feel like.
These don't feel like non-negotiables. There's something, we've done something wrong.
Well, and the other question
Well,
is,
let's,
are
we
they?
can do another alternative
Yeah.
down here, where we can play around with it, that's the whole idea.
The ones that you're talking about will drop out of the must-dos that lift your growth appetite.
That's right. So, but also it's not just what must be done, because the question then is, well, there's way too much. We can't even achieve half of it. So you can say we must do it, but if we just can't get it done in the period of time, then what's the point of having it there? We then need to reprioritise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we fiddle with the numbers.
Yeah.
Change the must.
If we go back, I think if we go back to 5, we go back to 5, that's probably is our must do. And then there's, well, maybe not growth, maybe you just shift the 4 on the growth, I don't know, but you know, I mean, this is the baseline have to do, we can have the other stuff out. It's not a case of we're not doing it, it's just a case of we start from.
Take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, cool.
Regroup, see how we want to do this, because we're trying to change all the numbers to try and get the things that we intuitively support or not. And I don't know, maybe we just need to spend some time to actually capture the things we want to question.
Go through the could do's and the would do's and circle them and go, actually, yeah, we could and we will.
And I think the parting thought before your break is this isn't to confirm your non-negotiables, it's to open up this conversation. Which is very helpful. Because even if we don't land the numbers in the grid today, we should get a sense of what we should go and build.
So I think what John's suggesting though is have a break and then maybe sounds like you want to have a go at a different approach.
Well,
I've got a couple of projects I think
Which is
No,
more
I
what
think
we
we've all
can-
got, we've all
Yeah.
got some things that we question.
Yeah, and maybe
uh,
going to the questions.
And even if it's just flagging up houses that we want a bit more information on, because I think that's where we're struggling.
We go through the list in the,
I haven't talked to Cody about Vision Island Jetting.
Yeah,
And the emergency fund.
yeah.
But we.
Wasn't a meeting.
We want the bridge to get up.
26. That's what I'm wanting to exclude from the budget. Not the should.
Right, where are we starting again?
Let's just do a quick 5 minutes, like stretch.
Yeah. Oh.
Prematurely. Sorry, I'm taking it.
Well, no, actually, I think we can start because if we're gonna do an alternate one, we can just decide on which ones we want to move to test.
Yeah, well, what I would suggest before we do that, because I think we've all got some things that are in that list that we're not sure about, and we're trying to manipulate the schools to think about this. But there is this piece which I hadn't seen in the pack, where the team already worked out that there will be some things like the town centre projects, the network, the refuse upgrades, that they're going to come back to us on anyway. So maybe if we recognise, and that might be the arterials or the MRF or the Parker, I'm not sure if there's any big ticket items that we need to discuss further, that we add them to that list, recognise that we'll deal with those separately, and then because the staff really need us to land where we're at so that we've got fewer in the must-dos, notwithstanding they won't be all exactly where we want to be.
what list do you want to start with? The base cases in our pack,
I was going to say that PET has the must-dos at quite a trim level.
at a good level.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good, if anyone has any problems with the ones that have been presented, that feels like a better place to start rather than going through the different model that we've gone with.
Well,
That was interesting exercise.
I mean,
the base case, I think all those must-dos were reasonable. Yeah, but I didn't say anything.
I don't think Skipper's Bridge should be must.
paper out, I think it was going to be a must do.
But that's something that we
You
can just.
think it should not be,
But was that
and I
done?
think that youth canal should be.
Yeah, well, I
I
think they're quite different.
When I look at those two then and figure out why they come to the. what they come to.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, that's why I think.
Take out,
Yep.
Yeah.
original.
Okay, let's ask the bigger question though. Yep. It's that, we've had a base case here. We've adjusted some of the settings to get today's council base case now, which is, quite a lot more money. We've got to keep in mind too, how much money we've got overall to play with. And also that this is only the property infrastructure stuff. We haven't got to community services.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Which is why we're thinking maybe go back
the
to the
reason
start.
we can go and start fitting with individual at some point further down the line, ones that we do want and ones we don't want. But in the meantime, to get to that point, we need to do this and adjust these settings until we get the figure that we want around about the right amount. Still having some left over for the other things we need to do that we're not even talking
But
about.
the figure isn't all of it, because again, there's the revenue part, there's the how much is, or there's the how much, what is the consequential OPEX off the back of it? So even that's not gonna,
So can we just to reset this next stage, I know we need to do the PX bit first. You're not doing that? Okay. So what we need to do today, Jess, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, the key outcome is that it's the not negotiable stuff that we kind of want to bottom out. We don't need to talk about all the should do's and could do's today, because we're going to come back in subsequent sessions to talk about that. So what we want to do is we've done some fiddling around with this already. We're going to put up, we've changed growth back to 5, I think. We're going to put that up, go through the list, not all of the list. And what we'd like from you at some point in this process is for you to give us what about this project? Why isn't this coming through as a must do? Why are we saying this one's a must do? And we might not answer those questions now, but we're going to take that away to bring into the next session. You'll see there's a slide in the slides that said in the next session, or the next one of the subsequent sessions, we're going to bring you kind of actual, more detailed information about some of those strategic projects. Those of you who were here last time, you remember we did those A3s where we went through what the projects cost, what it was made up of, what the outcomes were, where they were at in the process, like, you know, actual detail about what was being delivered. So we want to collect from you which projects you want to know more about. And if there's ones where you think they should be must-dos, or they shouldn't be, even after, you know, fiddling with the formulas, tell us that so we can take it away. But we didn't want to get in today into all the should-dos, could-dos, other than those kind of commentary, right?
No, I really think priority for today, let's set your baseline and the different permutations of that you want to see come back to a future session. And ideally, if we have time, it would be really helpful to have a conversation about the relative priority between levels of service and those impact categories, if indeed they're parity. So.
Because those are the levers that you can pull. So we want to focus on those levers. Yeah, we'll then go and see the consequences for the cost and what the project list is. Throw us any concerns, questions you have, then we can go pull something else.
And for clarity, you'll come back, and if the numbers are ridiculous, if that we still have the opportunity to say, actually, we can't afford it.
Yes, but you're going to see the numbers right now. So when you just did so this base case we just put in, it showed you 900 million, and you went, well,
what is the next time?
No, but then we go away and we scope up the full LTV of how it's funded, what the gap is, blah, blah, and if at that point on that doesn't make sense, we need to drop a couple of these capital projects that we can still do that, right?
Absolutely. And you've got more than one opportunity between now and when you get presented with that total picture as well.
So we're going back to the base case that was in the pack.
I think what I heard is you set where you thought your thresholds were around your non-negotiables. We realised that was going to cost quite a lot of money, and immediately you started negotiating those.
Yeah.
So that tells me these aren't really your non-negotiables. You're not actually willing to spend whatever it takes to achieve that level. It was quite useful, I thought, turning on the list of projects so you could see actually what are the big chunky things that are driving that spend, and actually does that feel like a must or not? And if it doesn't, we can come back here and say, well, we'll run a different scenario.
Is there any just opportunity to just remove some of those big chunky items that we just do not want in there anyway, that are like could be skewing it?
Like projects that you feel today, you could say we're just not interested in investing in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Nip it now.
Yeah, just because obviously it's like there's some skews that are quite big, and yeah.
The thing is, it was a lot of must-dos. It reduced the differentiation between the different priorities. It is, you know, it pulled up a lot of must-dos. So then you can't differentiate between the could-dos and the would-dos. They all just got lumped into must-dos, which makes it harder then to.
Which is why Jessie wants to go back to, and we revisit what those scores were, because they're clearly not representing your absolute not negotiables. So now when you're thinking about it, I think Jessie, you're going to go through them one at a time again. Think about this time. What is your absolute? Is that what you said you're going to do?
Can I jump in? Yeah, rather than going line by line and just say, like, to give you a perfect example of what you're asking for, the minor improvements programs it could do. I think that should be a must do. Does that help?
No, that's not what we're doing.
Okay.
No.
No worries.
I was more, sorry, Jessie, is this what you were planning on doing? We now go back to service performance.
Yeah, but I think we can do that in the context of having conversations about those specific projects that have caught your eye.
I've read this document like 12 times now and gone over it and had a look at each project by project. And I don't know how that fits in terms of obligation, service, growth, financial, but I can tell you if that chews up something that I don't like, it's not going to work for me. For me, it's just not how I want to frame it.
What the staff are trying to do.
I understand what they're trying to do, and I really appreciate the work, which is why, sorry, I don't mean to jump in front of you. Mitch, you carry on.
Thanks, mate. I think we have to, because I think what they're doing is going to help us reach substantiated decisions within which what you're suggesting not only can happen, but has to happen too. But we can't short circuit that. We have to have a more deliberative approach, more systematic approach that justifies what we're doing in the bigger picture. Just leaping to particular projects that we do or don't like isn't really helpful in doing that, but we do have to do that at some point, not right now.
I mean, to contextualize, when we did the waste minimisation community fund, we did a similar process where we scored everything based on 0 to 5, and then we came at the end and then we realised modelling only takes you so far. Modelling gets you 80%, the last 20%, there are external factors that you can't consider. So I'm not expecting that this is going to be, neither is anyone here, and I totally recognise that. But I guess to my point, I think you've done a pretty good job already in terms of what you've prioritised as must-dos and pretty much should-dos. There's only a few tweaks I'd make. So it feels efficient to go that route rather than trying to come up with the right answer from the other end.
I agree. So that's a question for the council, might be, the only things you think are must do are things that have a 5 rating of an obligation or 100% renewals. Nothing else is a must do. If that's what you're saying, then the list we've put in front of you is the true baseline. We were assuming you would have some other must do's that you would want to layer in.
I think it's a good foundation. And I think at the moment, everything feels so ethereal that it's hard to grasp onto what's actually tangible, and to have a foundation of, well, if we don't do this, we're unlawful. It just makes me feel like I'm moving in a sense of progress, more so than flow.
And it's the message that we got from the community was, you know, keep it to, you know, the basics, and then we can add in some things that we all agree on around the table. But I think keep the must-dos limited, and then we can. So we're actually showing. Then we can go to the should-dos.
So Jessie, what that would mean is that if there's a project in here that's related to service performance, maintaining current service levels, is related to supporting growth, wouldn't be included in the must-dos.
That will be discretionary, and we get to pick based on
noting Mitch's earlier comment about we are required to maintain levels of service and we are required to service growth. So,
but it gives us the ability to go back and go which bits based on advice from staff, rather than it chucking every bit of growth into the. Yeah, we do. They're not that. It's not that complicated.
So one of the complications is that there are 12 of you. And so if we were to go through the rest of this list line by line, what we need from you is a joined up, consistent direction, in which case, I mean, we could do that as officers. We can, you know, sit in a room as the P&I leadership team with 4 of them who are five of them who are neck deep in this every day and go, right, this is what we think the priorities are based on our knowledge. One of the complications is that this is a process with 12 of you around the table who might all have different views. So we're trying to provide a kind of a systematized way of moving through that thinking process, but also giving the opportunity, to your point, Cody, to come in, I would have thought at a point slightly later than where we are now, to go, that one doesn't seem right, that one doesn't seem right, that one doesn't seem right. Does everybody agree that it's move that?
Yeah, I mean, I just...
When to move some of them earlier, I think that's what
I think it's helpful to your point, move with principles. So, you know, we all agree renewals, that's something that's in our baseline. You know, let's make sure that we all agree statutory obligations, that's in our baseline. Maybe we could have the conversation of what other factors are in our baseline when it comes, I mean, I know this is what that's trying to do. Yeah. Sorry. I understand the intent, and so I'll shut it.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I don't think we are all settled in our minds that this one that's in here is confirmed this, because we've already said that there are things in here that aren't shown as must-dos that we think they should be. And I think if we all went through this different projects, 12 of us would all have slightly different versions of what was a must-do and what wasn't. So, and that's where what we're trying to do today is just tweak these things a little bit to see what pops up as a must-do and what pops out as a must-do.
But a must-do is what
we've got stuck on the one we're on. We've got this one. We've done the one we're on, and that's where we've stopped so far. Because it is quite complicated, but we all have different versions of what.
But what can we all agree on? As you say, it's a collective view. So if we all got different views, we'd all like to add a few things in. But what is the minimum that we can agree on that has to be
just go back to where we were 3 years ago, and we'll start picking projects.
But we're going to start adding things in, and there is a prioritisation in here already.
And I think this is a really good tool.
That is a good tool.
Adjusting these settings to see what happens.
What would you like to adjust then, Gavin?
Well, I mean, if it was me, if I had it to myself and I was just playing around with it one night, I would set everything low and everything high, and see what those results were, and then start adjusting them in between and see where it falls out in the middle, one by one.
Can we get access to it?
To do that, but that's what I would do. I think if we did that now, it would take days.
Yeah, but if we did it individually, sitting at home, we can have the
If you individually do it at home, you'll send us 12 different versions. So that's why we're having a workshop.
Yeah, but when you're dealing with complex information like that, and everyone has a view and their own values and interests that they're representing, the best you can come up with is a group average. So if we did all of that, and we would get probably, as we have been doing with other things this term, and probably since local government was invented about 3,000 years ago, then we game the system. So things we want to be given a high priority in a collective decision, we give it more a higher rating. But if we did that, you get the opportunity to do that, and then that came back, at least you then have an average view.
So this workshop is intended to be an average view. So this is where we adjust, discuss, adjust, discuss.
High quality
average.
I think where we're struggling is it comes back to what Nicola was saying earlier. There are a handful of high value projects that are really sort of moving about depending on where we do believe it. The danger is that that's skewing
the model
because they are big, but it's making us question some of the assumptions. So it'd be interesting if you actually took everything out that was over 20 million and then tweaked it, then you might, I don't know. There's
So I think we've got two options here, is that we go back through these not negotiables with different ratings, then go and look at the list. Actually, let's do that, then go and look at the list, and then you'll see the big things that you think might be skewing it, and you can then say, what does it look like if we take that out?
Yeah.
Because I actually think if you change some of these settings, those big things are gone anyway. So if you...
Suggestion. I would suggest that actually you're coalesced around everything except there was a bit of subjectivity with both. So I would suggest you stick with the land of your core, but you lift your growth a little bit to isolate it to priority growth areas or major deficiencies, and we drop the cost range down to 20 million for the highs. What that will do is it will automatically tip any project greater than 20 million into very high. And so unless it's forced in here, you're talking about them as strategic candidates. They're so big, they will have their own discussion.
Good idea.
Let's just see what happens. If we go to the...
So the change you made here, other than the 20 million high categorisation, is you've taken growth from 3 to 4.
Yeah.
So that's in prioritise, it's added a significant amount of growth.
No, reduced.
And prioritise, but there was split evenly.
Yeah, so
growth is green.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you have is your core, when you have this spinning in 3, that was up around 930 million. It's now down to 600. So I reckon if we go to the project list, those big dots that were sitting at the top there, like the arterial, the parking building, I don't think
arterial's out. Yeah.
Well, parking building's still there.
Parking building's still there.
I think it was
Yeah, they are.
They are.
Okay.
So you're saying moving growth from 5
No, 3 to 4.
cause the arterial to drop out?
Yeah.
3. No, 3 to 4.
Can you filter this back to the must-dos now?
Changes.
And the reason you're saying these parking buildings was right, I kind of agree with speculating the reason I have to go back and check is all of the modelling tells us we already have a really significant efficiency capacity in the town. That's a big part of what's driving current travel time and congestion. So it's not so much growth driven as possibly both.
So just people are just driving around looking for a park.
Walk around looking for a free park. And the other thing probably just to remember is if it's $115 million, you might say, yeah, well, let's deal with half. Like, let's get, 1 or 2 buildings underway, and we're going to tackle this issue over 20 years, not 10. So,
And because there's self-funding, it then has a totally different longer term effect on the.
Yeah, but you still got to carry the.
So really,
we've still got it. There are.
buildings that I think we're making.
I do too.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
So I think we put that on the list of things that we bring back next time to give you a more fulsome picture of how they fit into the big picture, what their revenue is, et cetera, what the delivery models might be.
So respecting you might as a council go, yeah, 80-20. The mustard is still right. There's a few here that are sitting well. Skippers not quite performing. And does everything else get filled out? I think a little bit.
Sorry.
The merge we had previous workshops about, so I think we can park that one just for the moment until we work out where we're going on our strategic directions. The transfer station was linked to the merge, so that was an independent. So again, we can park that on the transfer stations must do because that's right, but that. Construction waste facility. There's a semantic discussion about whether we do that or the private sector deliver that.
So does it feel right that that's a must do?
No.
No.
Feels like something you would want to have a discussion about.
And with skippers, like we would like to do that, but is it a must do?
I think the important thing to remember, I think, with the Skippers Road and Bridge is that that isn't a solution. It's saying there's a problem that needs to be solved, which is what you do about the fact that that's it.
And it has a dollar figure attached to it.
Yeah.
It is also kind of an exception to the rule, you know, as a rule, you're saying if our existing assets are due for replacement, we're going to replace them. Something like the skippers is always going to warrant it.
Yeah, with tens of vehicles at best today crossing it.
Intelligent transport.
So you might still get out of mustard.
Yeah, I would take that out. It needs different consideration.
Is there anything around that on skippers up because it's only 15 million?
No, that it is there exclusively by virtue of it being a 100%.
Okay.
If we change that to 95% renewal, 5% level of service, just for argument's sake, it would have been.
Oh, right.
So where's all the big growth projects? Like the things that enable?
You're not really there.
Well, see, that's.
Yeah.
So
what were you expecting to see?
Well, I don't know. More like
So this includes every growth project that addresses a significant forecast capacity shortfall within a zoned growth area or across an existing network or enables development in a priority growth area not yet zoned. This includes all of those projects.
I mean, I just want to know where the projects are on the list.
So by going to 4, we've reduced the growth.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, but that definition I just gave is what
It
it
should
doesn't
be in
include.
here.
So we would have.
But the list is longer. Look.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe should we turn the renewals off just to make it a slightly more manageable list?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The other thing I was going
One
to
of
say,
the, oh, sorry.
just on that list, you know, we've already said a few times that we think the Arthur's Point Bridge is a must do.
Yeah.
But it's still not
Still not popping up.
Correct. So
That's one of the.
we need to keep adjusting the settings until we see the ones that we think should be on it.
Or we just put them in because it's not a perfect model.
To your point, there's something that will push projects up. Because if we go back to one of the things that you put up about an hour ago, if some of the must-dos are must-dos because, and they're in green because they're cheap, right? Like, and some of the more expensive things fall out because they're very expensive. They end up already.
We can pull them back.
Yeah, so these settings here, the ones that you talked about, I wrote out, they will put something into the must-do tag irrespective of its cost. These things are what will determine whether, so the thing that I don't think the matrix is project, that they're prioritised, they're very high impact, but very low cost.
Right.
Yeah, so this is what differentiates the cost. You see the higher the cost. If it's a high cost range, it's never going to. If it's a high impact for low cost, it feels like.
But we could change it.
But it makes the big projects always discretionary and we can put them in and make them a manual.
Why stay away from
It's not
something
a.
that's really critical and really expensive?
Yeah, I mean, but that's just the limitations of the modelling, but I think that's okay.
Yeah.
It's what we're trying to achieve is get most of the stuff in, and then we do the bespoke projects.
Yeah,
later.
exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we were looking at the list though, we need to see if there was, we go back to the list.
There's a name. Southern Corridor, all that stuff,
what enabling projects in the Southern
I don't know.
you're expecting?
I'm not expecting anything. I'm just wondering what is there in those new areas around transport.
A lot of those aren't our projects.
Yeah, but around but I suppose they're not transport.
I have just,
State highways, yeah.
I've just noticed something. I think we might have skipped a beat when it was my fault, I added it like 2 hours before the workshop, that strategic candidate category. So the concept was that anything that was over a certain, like over that high cost range, would automatically be that like rush us. Hannah's concerned with me, and so we should really see the others like Rich said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do that. Should we just look back to that list? Just
Yeah.
roll down the list slowly.
So have you filtered out yourself?
I have, yeah.
Just scroll down.
Oh, no, that still has renewals in there, I think.
One way.
Right next to the black. Yeah.
So if it's blank, does it not consider it at all? Zero. That's the thing.
0 including everything. Yeah, we might just take that away and put that.
So this would suggest I'd have to check the numbers in the back that your waterways renewals are here because they offer benefits above just being a renewal. There's made a for reasons beyond the fact that you're just a renewal. Probably a service performance thing as well.
So we're down into things under $5 million now. So if we go back up to the top, there's not that much.
It's not very big, but that's because everything over 20 was pulled out, wasn't it? Yeah. What if we put it up to 30 or 40? Can you see certain things starting to pull in? Like, I mean, arterials is massive. It's bigger than that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we could raise that 20 million quite a bit to 30.
I don't think that's what's
Okay.
now. So with the parking buildings there and there are 100, over 100 million.
All right.
It's just those projects. Can we go back to them? What it's saying to you is that the PT interchange is responding to growth or service performance at a level you've said you're not willing to tolerate. Yeah.
We need to, I need more information on why the parking building.
So we've already put those on the list
Yeah.
earlier for doing an A3 to bring back and talk about.
Same with the construction waste, because I know there's impacts from moving it too. Don't align with.
Yeah,
that's got a massive.
Yeah.
I think the construction waste is good. I mean, when you think about the landfill, I think really it should be a must do.
Well, that's one of the ones where it's in there. Some think it may not be in there, but
Yeah.
maybe the way to
Yeah. It's not a clear out.
Right. Where to next?
So there's nothing wild on there. We've got questions about parking buildings.
Yep.
We're going to come back to you to talk about the town centre generally, so that will include the PT interchange, because that's part of the arterials kind of, moving, how you move cars picture. So just oversimplify it, how you move cars. And you're not highlighting anything else on there that looks like it shouldn't be. Oh, and construction waste. Oh, Skipper's Road. Okay, so quite a few things. Actually, quite a few.
Well, those
I want to see the strategic project, which is the big ones. But
Can you just scroll down a little bit, just make sure that we're off the far end of that?
They drop in cost quite significantly.
Yeah, but still they add up. But they're all great.
I don't like, one of the factors is whether or not it considers our plans.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, if we put that at 5, like, given all of the work that's gone into the strategy around this, I can't imagine a parking building coming out as, like one of the top performers of it.
But it's in one of our plans.
You haven't set your,
there will be a 3.
you haven't set that to include things required to deliver on our strategies and plans. You've got a level above that.
it's gonna be 3.
Yeah, so things that are in this, in the list, purely because, well, where the main driver is to deliver on strategies and approve strategies and plans aren't on this.
I guess it's hard to reconcile the level of investment in these projects doesn't, to me, reflect necessarily the direction of what our plans go towards. And it's mainly a consequence of scale, more so than the projects themselves. So, you know, whilst there might be, you know, useful projects in the wider context, their scope and cost, for me, makes them completely blown out of proportion to everything else that we could do. And to me, cost is, we can do a lot of things really meaningful for a small amount of money. And yeah, I think that I'm surprised that with the factoring, $115 million for a parking building is coming up as a must do. It's just,
so that's why we're going to bring that back next time.
Yeah.
With more information about it. So that's one of the ones you flagged that doesn't fit as a must do. The
arterials I still need to see
yeah,
proper
the arterials,
so that's a worthwhile.
construction waste,
Street
and
upgrades.
yeah.
The refuse transfer.
Yeah, but the next section, what's after must do? Is it
So
should be?
Prioritize.
You see that category maybe.
While we filter for that, can I just, I don't know if it's a question or a clarification. But what I'm hearing is you've said we're really interested in pulling anything required to respond to growth at this level through set it before. However, it's returning projects that you're going, well, actually, because of the price, it's up for discussion. It is negotiable. So I guess I would question whether actually is responding to growth at that level and non-negotiable.
Well, it's within the confines of what is deemed a project based on this list. There are other ancillary ways to solve the same problem. A gondola, for example, isn't on this list, but it could also create the same outcomes as arterial stage 2 and 3, but it might be a more cost competitive way. So by nature, this modelling is going to have a limitation based on the inputs that it has, which we can all recognise. But what I'm saying is, like, please don't pigeonhole into these projects, because I don't think these are necessarily the best ways to solve the same problem.
So the transport projects on here are part of a broader program that has looked at all of those other components. So the original business case for that said we need a gondola also said we need park and rides, we need parking buildings, we need the arterial, and we need the BP roundabout upgrade, and we need Frankton Flats upgraded, and. So it was an entire program of work. So particularly the big transport projects in here, they weren't done in a bubble, not just our work. And when you get the transport network plan, you'll see the updated, refreshed picture of how all of that fits together. They definitely were not done in a bubble. They are all part of an integrated. That's what the way to go has been talking about for the 5 years since that business case was last updated. So these projects come out of an integrated work program that already takes into account, and to be honest, already assumes that we're going to have a gondola or a whoosh or something like that, an offline MRT. Because we're going to.
But I mean, yeah,
we're retesting that at the moment.
Given, you know, elected in Upper Clutha to spend over $500 million on infrastructure enabling cars in Queenstown is no one's priority, and so that's why it's hard to represent the community in this realm when we look at the quantum of investment towards solving a problem which is an inconvenient truth of congestion.
Which is why we're going to come back with more information on.
But the reality is, and included in Southern Infrastructure's proposal, is at least, at the bare minimum, it's a 350 place car park out here. It cannot work unless people can get to the golf.
So, but you know, we've talked about it. It's coming back to us. Like, we're probably going to take it out. We're probably not going to agree to it. So let's do the next.
And I think there's a really simple thing we can do before this comes back to you, maybe improve for the community services conversation. Is we can set this so that projects over 50 million, they immediately go into strategic candidate, which will take precedence over your non-negotiable. So actually, you're saying, in principle, if we can deliver this non-negotiable for within this cost, great. If it's over this cost, we need to talk about it. And I think I just did a quick filter at 50. That would pick up Arthur's Point Bridge. It would pick up both stages of the arterial, PT interchange, parking buildings, park and ride, town centre street upgrades, MRF, and a new office building. But you feel like all the ones that you kind of
Maybe not the new office building yet until we've figured out what we're doing.
But it means it's the next.
Yeah,
it does.
It can be.
Okay, so if we think those things are, you know, we'll make that adjustment. Outside of that, or with that cost constraint on top, is there anything else you want us to test for your baseline? What do you feel good about it?
Like if we're taking some of the strategic ones out, then where the growth rating sit, I think would be probably the one to model at this level or that level. Because in a way, it's easier to actually see those two lists, isn't it, side by side, visually.
Yeah, and then big picture, what do you want to put back in to make it, and it should strategically, should only be in if it's actually going to deliver a strategic outcome.
And that's before we talk about us upgrades versus new courts.
Yeah.
So we then become completely multi-dimensional.
I'd like to look at the solar energy conversion, or I don't even know if it's solar, but solar. With the price of energy, the way it's going, and with the issues that we're having with the capacity, with the lines, and I just feel like it might be a really good strategic investment because it could bring costs down. Like, and anything like that has a massive revenue component or that will bring a cost down could be something that enables the rest of the must-do list to strategic happen.
Yeah, that's come up again is that if we don't see what the revenue or savings components are, we can't make a decision.
But there might be, yeah. So
no, I know.
But I just.
But in it, well, for us to give direction, we have to make a decision in our minds. So,
I don't think solar's it's not technically a must-do, but when you look at the cost of the must-do list, does it bring it down, and therefore it could become a must-do in order to achieve? I don't know.
Well, that makes it something that you
because it would
negotiate on.
Yeah.
You might choose to put it.
Yeah.
And get more information on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I raised it earlier. I'm just wondering if or how you could test a modal shift option for these where priority of cars and like once parking dollars, for example, move out and prioritising active travel investments moves in and what that model might look like.
So we'll need Tony Pickard to be back for that, but I'm fairly certain what he'll say is that the integrated program we've been working towards for a number of years is all based on trying to minimise cars to the maximum extent possible. We need a mode shift away from cars of something like 50% in order to achieve the outcomes we need. So the program, and that's why this program has in it active travel and roading stuff, and it's working together with ORC and NZTA on public transport, offline MRT and roading upgrades. You need all of those things to get a functioning network, and we still need 50%. So I don't think that decreasing investment in the roads, we have to do that investment, and in order to not fill up those roads to a point where they are at 500% capacity, you also need all the other investments because you've got to get 50% mode shifts. That's not quite, that's not the right number, so don't quote me on the 50%, but something like that.
I've heard all that. Can I just say one bit here though, is we've heard all that, we know that.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying at this experimental stage, what we're talking about is what ifs.
Yeah,
I want to hear what
that
ifs.
for sure. We can do it right now.
Okay.
Alternative transport choices up there.
Just a comment on the car parking building, that's also for the road spaces currently taken up by cars parked on roads and streets, and that's obviously for legal travel and if you have cars parked around the edges of the town centre. I know I'm not advocating for it, this is a consideration. It's not just for storage of private cars within the town centre, but it's also releasing some street space, releasing other space.
That sort of stuff you can test now. Black Street car park, it's empty. You know, you got Skyline Gondola's car park's empty, even though that only the customers are allowed parking there. But we're not full in terms of It's just the preference of where people want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So if you make it cost prohibitive or you remove the car parks
Yeah.
completely, you can test that stuff on a small scale. So that's the sort of stuff I'm talking about. Just the little, I'm not saying, hey, let's reinvent the whole transport business case. I'm saying there's some bloody good stuff in there, but we need to start thinking differently because the reality is a lot of those business cases have been based on assumptions around funding. We know now we're not going to get those funding avenues coming through.
Yeah.
So we have to think differently now.
So I think this is a really nice segue into how we perhaps use the last of our time together to talk about, sure, there's probably some things at the margins and best case we need to go and test, but it sounds like potentially you're interested in exploring a scenario where access to alternative modalities is higher priority than other things. So if we reflect that, what you see is you've moved 13.5 million out of your could do into your should do bucket. So I guess just that's not telling
No, it's not telling you that, right?
But what it's saying is relative to other investments, you should spend your money here. If that's your priority, spend it here.
Yep.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's over 10 years.
There are ones that you want us to.
There was a congestion chart one. And again, I don't know the nuances of what that means, and being able to deliver that within the next 3 years or whatever it is, but that would actually enable modal shift.
Yes.
Or complement it, I should say.
Yes.
And so what would it look like with that in the project list? So that
Can we look at it
somewhere.
I think it was in there. It's in there as something to do.
Related to the intelligent transport system, so the two that are linked together.
And time of use charging as well.
Yeah.
So, it's just going, what does the extreme look like? If we are really potentially serious about shifting the dial on this, and we were quite aggressive in it, what would it look like?
So
Something that-
scenario time of use charging for the because the primary level of service that's attached to it is reliable travel times. Getting network operated efficiently. Yeah. So
Sleep that one as well.
yeah.
That reliable travel times based on a car movement, not a person movement. So the person moving on it.
It does relate to public transport as well.
I don't
So
know.
you're
But not cycle trails, for example.
not the time use charge but relate to cycle trails.
No, but the speed of travel is how efficient you can be.
Things you can measure.
Is there just a question? Is there, we've got these objectives we're trying to achieve. How do we close that loop? So what is the return on investment? So what is the value or the impact that we get out of some of these projects? Because we're seeing what's driving them, we're seeing what they're costing. But where do we close that loop? So if you spend this money on this, this is the benefit that you're actually accruing from doing that. Because
only in dollar and time or in environmental or broader?
I don't know. How do we score what's worth?
Yeah.
We're looking at the drivers, the assumptions, why we would do it, but in terms of what it delivers, I don't know.
Yeah. So the drivers, I think that we've identified are intended to be a proxy for that.
Right.
Because you get down into the detail of that on individual projects when you get into the business casing phase, but we can't do that for all of these projects over a 10-year period, particularly when we don't know whether they're going to be invested in. So there's a real fine balance between giving you enough information to make decisions for a direction of travel and not over investing in the amount of detailed design, planning, analysis you have to do to support it.
If you think about that one, when you were really interested in investments that provide greater access to these alternative modalities, and you saw that the initiatives shifted from the could do into the should and would do, what that's saying is that's giving you more pullback. So it's kind of reflecting the benefit. By investing, you have invested in realising.
But how do we account for risk? I'm a little obsessed with the last category. So for instance, safe roads. We can't quantify that. All we can quantify is the risk of loss. Or if you just develop all this out, sorry to keep coming back to you. you can't quantify what you get back. All you can quantify is what your potential loss might be. And that's sort of an insurance metric. So some of this stuff I don't think can be quantified, and that's our role as a council to provide stuff that may never have a payback.
Well, but some of it, I don't know, there's a lot of detail to get into. However, Paul and I was having a chat earlier about Frampton Track being closed because of the investment being put in to make the wastewater treatment system work and for it to be resilient. So if the Edith Cavell Bridge fails, the cost of it not being there for probably at least 4 months while the Bailey Bridge is put in, or might be less than that. I've seen it done too, but that you can quantify that. You can say that what the effect on our community and economy would be. And yeah, so some of this is doable if we wanted to.
But it's almost like you need an actuary to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Edith Cavell, as an example, have that information in the business case.
Yes.
These projects don't all have business cases in that detail because the projects aren't that far advanced in their planning.
Well, they're not big enough to bother.
Or they're not big enough to require it, not to bother. So these are proxies for the business.
Yeah, pretty rough and ready though in that regard, but they are a very useful tool to get us in that direction.
So benefits as much as risk, you know, like the risk attached to what happens in the events with will be it's really high.
Yeah.
Likewise, that investment will be attached to a resilience level of service. So
and the other point in the risk is that the longer we wait to do those things, the more they're going to cost later.
So the more the risks can go up.
So they cost less to build now if it's infrastructure, and then the impact, the value of that is much higher.
really interested in having this conversation because I've heard it from varying compositions of council over a few years now around, well, yep, we want to maintain levels of service, but not levels of service are necessarily created equal. So it would be really helpful for us to get a steer from you on whether that holds true for this council, and if it does, what are the ones you can help us around?
I've got another quick question, just mulling over again the comparison between the Skippers Bridge and Outs Point Bridge, and how one's popping up and one isn't. And I think you said that it's because the Skippers Bridge is fully renewables, whereas the Outs Point one is other things.
Yeah.
That's fine, and I understand there's information there about splitting the cost of it to growth renewables and visual service 40, 40, 20. But both bridges, well, the Outs Point Bridge need renewal equally as much as Skippers does, whether or not it's paid for out of different pots. And I'm just wondering, does it pick up that? So it's still 100% renewals. It's 100% growth as well, almost one value on. But those things they're independent of each other basically.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. It's a pretty crude way of putting the rules.
Yeah.
The baseline that we take our way. One of the mechanisms we could apply here is actually what happens to the baseline of anything with the renewal component is pulled through. I mean, the reality of Australia world is that the sign is beneficiary and we're not going to do it like at this point. So those cost drivers is based on what we know.
No, because I understand it from the cost side of it, but for determining whether it's a must do or not, it has the same priority as a renewal as Skippers does, if not higher.
Much higher because
I think what we've heard today is that Arthur's Point Bridge is a must do, so we just box it into the must do category.
We don't have to.
We don't have an exception to some of this because of, this is imperfect.
Yeah.
Although
we can force it in.
Although what Gavin's identifying may be a factor that needs to be taken into account in other cases too.
That's why we're looking at the list, and you've flagged a bunch of things for us to come back and talk about what you're worried about.
Coming back to the level of service, well, Tricia likes to look at. I think waterways, just because of the value of that in our future transport network.
Yeah, I'd be able to dial it up.
I would dial that up to a 2.
See what happens.
Because if we go 1 or 2, aren't we, on these?
Or you can go moderate. You can say it's standard, moderate, or high.
It's sort of just, yeah.
In the transport space, what does pathways cover? Is that footpaths, cycle paths, or?
And right, course paths.
Bridge, so we're talking about an LTP that we're going next July, right? So we get this one bridge in tomorrow.
So, pathways is the full level of services pathways is accessible for all users.
Right.
I would say the majority of initiatives that are attached to that renewals of the existing pathways, establishing a new activity would be attached to the alternative transport choices.
Yeah.
Right.
Casey might be able to better answer that, but Arthur's Point Bridge still needs design work and things done on it, which is happening anyway.
Yeah, but I don't
This
know
year.
the question, sorry.
So my question was like, so
How do we
we're
make it a must
having a
do
discussion
now?
around agreeing an LTP next July. And I was saying if Arthur's Point's a must do way before next July, have we get it in?
It's already in.
Yeah.
There's a significant amount of money allocated in the current financial year to progress that project. By the time this kicks in, it will just be much closer to being sure.
So whilst there's been a lot of chat about Arthur's Point Bridge, and whether it's being prioritised and funded by us and by NZTA, we prioritised it last time. NZTA prioritised it last time. The funding that was in this 3-year period was the funding we needed to progress it to the point where it can now be fully, like, the NZTA funding periods are only 3 years. Yeah, that's right, Jesse? And I don't think there's any question from NZTA that they're not going to prioritise it this time.
That's just we need to prioritize.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
Okay.
Of course, that's how we apply for them.
Just interested in the.
Moving away to the bridge, just coming back to the charts on the board. And again, transport is the issue of the day. If we were looking at alternative transport choices and reliable travel times, I mean, those sort of go hand in hand, because if you're going to get people onto a bus, it has to be reliable.
Yes.
So reliable travel times isn't just cars, is it?
No.
So.
Well,
anything that uses the road.
Yeah. So.
But anything other than a motor vehicle using the road, your everyone is reliable. Yeah, I know exactly how that's going to
well, I wouldn't say that public transport. I mean, public transport has the same problem as cars on our roads currently.
Well, it's anything other than a motor vehicle.
Yeah.
So is there any way we can nuance that? Because we would like more reliable travel times for public transport, notwithstanding they're actually currently finding the same bit of road for cars that.
Yeah.
Which is why we then go into the conversations about offline MRT, which are not ours to fund.
Okay.
Unless we go down the time of use congestion charging contribution, and you still need to improve the roads that we've got so that buses can effectively use them, because we still need in the future both the bus system and an offline MRT.
Yeah, bus priority.
Yes.
Separate those two things.
Yeah.
The sections, the lights, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
So which one would we dial up to get bus priority? To come higher up the list.
You need to dial up Chris Bishop.
Yeah.
Luxon announced that on Friday.
Is there one of those levels of
It depends on the broader network plan, because a lot of the places we need the bus priority are state highways.
Yeah. Okay. So
both of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's each one.
No. Okay. And yeah, it's a good point. It's not our roads to go paying the lines on.
The answer to your question is alternative transport choices.
Okay.
Yes.
About projects that we already sort of have in the system, right? I'm just thinking, new council looking 10 years ahead, how do we look at projects that aren't in the system yet that meet these needs that we might want to? I was just thinking that someone's going to ask me, I can't think off the top of my head, but there will be things potentially. How do we
I think we just have to focus on the ones we have got.
Well, yeah, no, exactly.
You have to come up with one.
I'm just
Share it.
imagining the community comes up with, you know,
Sure.
it has in the past.
So an annual plan,
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 annual plans, and then you have another.
And if it's big, that's right, change.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there the capacity, the ability between now and then to look at something that the community might suggest that we need to do this, or the other thing. There might even be submissions on requests for, and they might be very small things, which aren't quite necessarily captured by this.
Just before you answer that, could I make a comment on this?
Yeah, sure.
At the same time, when we're going through this project list, and I'm all for slashing and burning stuff that I don't agree with, but there's a whole ton of stuff in there that's been in the long-term plan for years and years and years that the community's expecting to one day get to year 1 or 2 or and actually get delivered. Butler's Wall, for example. How much respect do we have to give to that with, yes, the tunnel from Arrowtown to Kadrona is the example. It's not in there yet, but how much respect do we have to give to all the things that are in there that we actually do have to sort of
That's up to us.
to get round to as
It's
well.
up to anyone else.
So we assess them on the basis of how they contribute to the outcomes that have been agreed with the community, the levels of service agreed with the community. And then you can layer on those things. So the framework that we've got here is how we apply kind of a robust, rigorous process to it based on outcomes that we've agreed. As we've talked about a number of times, you can then move things around.
Yeah. So you do the grown-up job, we get to go
Brilliant.
Yeah.
An agreement with each other.
I'm really worried I'm going to forget.
Go for it.
Okay. Response, provisions, solutions we're not particularly certain of. In your last LGP, you set some, I guess, kind of program level budgets for network optimizations in your growth areas. So they were acknowledging that there would be opportunities to do something. We just don't know what that something is yet. Similar with the PT network optimization budget.
Yeah.
And I think in community services, we may have budgeted for a kind of a reactive to community low cost type thing. So you could always have a like that. With respect to how things just keep shifting out and out and out, the next view that you get when all activities come together will also attach kind of a time horizon to these things. So we'll kind of be saying, at first pass, we've suggested that retaining all sits in the middle of the LTP, and we could show you where it was previously programmed and actually collectively, if we go, no, we want to see it earlier, we'll talk about it all now. Or actually we have to get slow. And so I think there's an opportunity there to have a conversation about when, as opposed to this. That's worth doing it when it gets regardless.
An example of where that happened at the last LGP was the replacements for the pool. So based on, you know, doing this kind of process that was prioritised out here, and you went, no, we think that should be done here. And so you brought forward.
Sorry,
That's okay. The Butler's Green, they came to us, they didn't like the solution, so they want the money at the time, and we were going to deliver it last term, just out of memory. I do feel like, no, what do we do? Well, yeah, because there was the anchors and the other things, they didn't look nice, they're like, just don't do it. Financial stewardship for waste management, if we put that to a 2, what does that change? It's the lead Dixie thing there, so.
I don't know, top of mind what we attached to that. Okay, move. We're going to have a look at the project list. Ooh.
We're looking for waste, aren't we? Bear with me. Sorry. So I think some waste project moved to prioritize.
It's management plan. That makes a lot of sense actually. You invest in your asset management and make more efficient staffing decisions about what you invest in. So that runs through. I think the others are probably certainly the other reasons. The other thing to do is actually filter to see what project is attached to that.
Could we see what happens when we dial down the financial management, but on waste, but whatever it was, but dial up the diversion piece, proportional diversion.
I think a lot moved to prioritize. Okay.
Okay, I've done it before.
Yes.
So which one's again?
Your construction waste facility performed better. I'm sorry.
Yeah, only one thing moved to prioritize. I think a few just moved up.
So nothing much changed. It just went from
Construction waste facility performs better. Your public placements perform better.
it's nothing major though, is it?
Product stewardship.
Yeah.
And
nothing changed to the must do. Nothing went into must do that wasn't.
This would never trigger a must do anyway. Anything would ever move up to in this scenario high cost prioritize.
Yeah.
And other things that support diversion are already performing well.
How does everyone else feel about that?
Well, we're mocking up a whole heap of different things. aren't we?
Yeah.
Back to-
Yeah.
That's
So the
what
waste-
we want to see. We really need a whole lot better.
Be one of the options.
The waste management program is heavily focused on diversion anyway. So this is just like a lot of these construction initiatives are about improving diversion, yeah. Construction, investments, a lot about diversion.
Yeah.
There's just not that many of them.
Yeah.
So there's not many places things move.
Are there any others here that you're going actually that's more important?
That resilience.
Crappy example, but it's safe road.
What's your thoughts on resilience?
My thoughts.
Well, you've always been an advocate for
Did you just adjust the transport?
and you too.
Yeah. But we're specifically doing transport.
I think we did that earlier, vulnerable.
Yeah,
groups
that's
and
true. We are.
one other is up.
Yes, good point.
So am I hearing that resilience does have a level of importance?
Yeah.
But it depends what it, I mean, what will it do in the list? Because that's, in theory, resilience is important, but
What if safe roads might have been more important?
What it will do, the initiatives that respond to or make a meaningful contribution to your resilience service will perform better.
Yeah.
The extent to which they perform better will be guided by the cost of whatever else is going.
It'll be interesting to see that, given what, I was talking about earlier, the small amount of investment in resilience now. Should have a significant impact.
we've given the Cadrona Road and everything. I mean, it's an interesting one driving that one regularly.
There's potentially some trade-offs in that transport. I was just thinking about resilience and the alternative transport options, because reliable travel times, I don't think is going to come up if you start putting in things like congestion charges. So,
I think the reliable travel time thing is NZTA for us, the buses. I mean, what we're looking at is extra lanes down there. That's not us. So we don't have a project attached to it, really, do we?
A number of the toolkits and what vehicles is transport toolkits will relate to reliable travel times, like intelligent transport systems, providing travel management. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in my head about the same thing. It's not that they're all one, it's that safe roads is equal to everything else. And in fact, safe roads, I think, ranks well ahead, and it's almost as if we make safe roads 0.5, or do we make safe roads
2 or 3?
How do we rank safe roads higher or highest? And I'm just speaking for myself.
Oh, it's making a reduced speed limit.
Yeah.
It's real easy.
It doesn't cost anything.
Oh, there's some-
A couple of signs.
Bit of tape on the side.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? We're looking at. Yeah.
Does anyone have a differing view about safe roads being the most important level of service in construction?
For a capital program, yeah, I do, because I do actually, despite the fact that I've watched about, some speed things, I've changed my mind again, but I do think, reducing the speed limit, you don't have to speed the thing.
It's quite.
So, I mean, this is it's a concept, but when you go back to what the projects are that it would lift, do you want to lift those projects?
The things that I top of mind think that would lift will be some of your renewals, the network station plan, got Ellie's online, she might have a thought about what else we attached to that. Okay.
Depends on how broad safe roads you're talking about, because network roads, critical network roads.
High speed roads versus low speed roads.
Versus,
Or shared roads, where you've got.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cycleways.
Yeah.
That's the result.
To the colour pedestrian.
Sorry, context as well, all the targeted intersection upgrades and the Wanaka network optimization plan. That was primarily
for cyclists and walkers and.
Yeah, so the formation of all this.
I was going to say, I think we've got to be careful because it's evident that the Road to Zero program, for instance, was a big driver under the previous government, but then they've moved to roads of national significance. And unless you take a balanced approach, I mean, look, roads that don't go, congested roads aren't dangerous roads, so that's great. We don't not killing anyone while they're sitting in traffic unless they jump out and bash each other on the head. I mean, I think we've got to be careful not to try to reinvent a balanced program through, prioritization at this stage. But I mean, just jumping back a little bit, someone said, "Oh, all these things are integrated." They are, and in terms of the transport program, and certain things unlock, the benefits don't get unlocked until you do something else and whatever, but we're nowhere near being able to deliver the whole program, and equally and this is the challenge that we're facing and that NZTA reflected to us the other day. We're not on track to unlocking any of those benefits without a substantially scaled up program. So anyway, I just wanted to, I'm not in favour of making safety the only driver of transport investment, because it can't be. It has to be a balanced approach,
But if it's making alternative transport choices safer because it's about the projects that we have in there are about making.
There's a whole bunch of reasons we do. There's a whole bunch of reasons we do mode shift programs. Safety is one of them. You're trying to get people, the 50% mode shift. You're trying to get people out of cars because of congestion, because of productivity, but you are also making that choice safer, because it's no point putting those bikes on the road because it's dangerous. Now, they're not one objective. They're all interrelated,
They are, but that's the point, is that we're given the projects that are in the list behind this, which that's why I keep asking, if we lift up safe roads, what's the projects that are going to be lifted up, rather than just like, oh, we objectively like safe roads, so we'll lift it up. And then
but why don't we look at it holistically and say what produces the greatest cost benefit or the greatest outcome, which is the benefits include safety, include congestion, include functionality. So why don't we take that holistic view and say, what's the most efficient way to achieve the outcomes that we are trying to with the money that we've got? Now, people have touched on this before, saying there's big projects, if you've got $50 million project, are we better off delivering, 10 $5 million projects or one $50 million project? And that's the sort of, they're valid questions, but they have to be weighed against what the beneficial outcomes are,
That's right.
Yeah, I think your reality is you're not going to invest in all of these things. So this is about us being able to give you a bunch of information, and you can look at these things side by side and say, actually, these 5 things cost us the same amount as this one thing, and actually they're all ranked the same. So what do we do this one instead of those ones? It's just a decision-making tool. I cannot stress enough, it's not making a decision.
Yeah.
Well, I guess then, based on what I said earlier around, make some assumptions around active travel. I'll say a different version of that is look at it through a priority lens of cars, and then give us the two alternatives. So you're prioritising cars, which are, things like car parks would come into there, right? So that's one side, and then you look at the other side of prioritising people, not cars. So safety on the roads could just relate to safe people, not safe cars.
So I'm pretty sure the program, if we don't have a version that prioritises cars.
Yeah.
So the entire program is based around how do we maximise moving people in the most efficient way using not the roads. If Tony was sitting here, I'm sure that's what he'd say, because I've heard him say it. I've looked at all the documents 50,000 times. I've sat in the strategic network plan sessions with NZTA. I don't think we can bring you a prioritised roads, prioritised cars.
Yeah, you're right, Penny. You're exactly right. Yep.
Whoever that is.
But it comes down to
Oh, it's Jeremy, excellent. Jeremy Cameron said I was right.
We can adjust settings. So,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
we can adjust settings to say, actually, what happens if we're prioritising reliable franchise? That's gonna.
With a car lens versus a people lens.
Well, it will have a car lens to
Yeah,
it, right?
right.
Because what happens if you're prioritising alternatives? And of course, we all acknowledge that ideally you do all of these things, but like Tanya said right up top, we've got to be able to do something.
Yeah.
How do we help you?
And if we're prioritising alternative transport, potentially people can use that alternative transport to get to the base of the gondola where you need the car parking building to store your car before you get on. Do you know, like, why are we assuming everyone needs a car to drive to the
We're not. We're not.
Oh, okay.
That's not the assumption that sits behind
And-
this. We need 50%, right? Might even be 60% of people to be not in cars, but the 40% that's left still require roads that work. That's what the program is based on.
With growth, then 40% in 10 years
It's not my
time,
number.
there's more cars than are on the road now.
Yes, so we need it to shift from 40, you know, and then it's a question
60% is already higher than anywhere, I think, anywhere ever has achieved.
But it's just, I mean, look, it comes back to the whole thing. This area is so constrained. There's so many issues with Queenstown CBD, and yet so much investment is pouring in to try and make it work.
Okay.
Okay.
There are lists
another
that
way.
this town centre upgrades are on the list of things that are coming back to us. Really want to the time.
Yeah, and your forecast stuff.
Yeah, but we've still got some gaps on those.
Yeah,
Do we need to do any more of the baseline?
no, I think we've got a few scenarios to run
Yeah.
with you, depending on how they land, we can test a few more. Probably the only thing I wouldn't mind is getting just a real quick temperature check on all these fine things are all actually equally. And so naturally what will happen is if you adjust those and you see balance financial, avoiding future financial impacts is more important than anything else. Initiatives that reduce financial impact will perform a bit better than this continuum. So
I think that sounds great.
the equal weighting is really useful,
Yeah.
but perhaps some of these things are more important to do than others.
I think financial impact is massive. Would that drive things that generate revenue to the surface as well?
Yeah.
This is more about that you invest to avoid and
Avoid having cost failure.
you don't do it, you pay more later.
So the two things that always stand out to me is legal risk and financial risk. Not just as an organisation, as a community, right? So
It's probably that you consider risk covered.
I'm just thinking
Yeah.
obligation would be,
But you, what I'm trying to say is because you've already
oh,
spent,
you're saying it's
that's
5.
negotiable. What this is doing is saying, well, how are we valuing the things that didn't fit it by?
Oh, I see. Okay, right.
Yeah, so a good example here would be how are we valuing delivering on our strategic plans
Yeah,
relative to initiatives that enable growth.
That's really tricky.
It might be too tricky, you know, so you can just leave it here. We can run a few different audits.
Does it mean projects that enable growth or projects ensuring that projects that are required for growth are funded?
What it would mean is that any initiative with a growth benefit, let's call it, whether that is enabling the growth or
Required.
it's required to service growth, they will perform or be recognised as sitting further up.
So they might beat our level of service to existing community. Because you prioritise growth over your existing level of service to your community. Yeah, no.
Yeah, but if it means that means we ensure that
They get in
the
the system.
DCs are then properly loaded, then shouldn't we prioritise it more?
Why don't we run, how about 4:30, how about we run some scenarios?
Please, that'd be great.
I think that
Thank
point
you.
that he makes that, you know, there should be a thing that, and that comes back to financial impact, but a different way to what you've already considered it. Isn't it?
Did you bring beer here? Did you bring beer?
There's still some in the fridge from the last lotting board.
Oh, thanks.
I saw it out.
Bring it out.
Right.
And we're
Okay.
All right.
thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you.
No, thank you.
And any feedback of that directly, this is first lift of the curtain, we're here to learn from it, so.
That's
Great,
great.
that's great model.
Really good.
Yeah.
Closest to
Okay.
game.
Thanks for bringing up problems.
Well done.
Right.